right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to call to order the Environmental Matters Committee meeting for July 23rd. For the record, all the members are present. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Move approval of the agenda as written.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. And now transferring the gavel to Rules and Government.
Okay. I'd like to call the Rules and City Government Committee meeting to order. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
With, and I don't know if we do that to the joint meeting.
This is a separate one, so you
Okay,
need to
so-
amend it now.
All right, so I move that we amend the agenda to include 0925.
Okay, that's a motion. I'll accept it. All in favor? Well, we need a second for that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll second it. Yeah. One of our members is not here. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I neglected to do the roll call. Note for the record, Alderman Arnett is present and Alderman Schandelmeyer is not present today. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Alderman Savage to begin the discussion on 2025.
All right, thank you, Madam Rules and Government Chair. So I guess we could just start off with staff. It looks like you have a presentation ready for us. I know we do have some questions that may be answered by the presentation. If you could just introduce yourselves for the record and then you can go ahead and get started.
Morning, I'm Allison DiMatteo, Engineer, Department of Public Works.
And Matt Fleming, I'm the Director of the Resilience Authority, and I apologize for missing the prior meeting.
Right. Can I please ask everybody to really speak into the mic and loud? I'm today a very old man, and so I need all the help I can get.
My name is Dan Hoadley. I'm a principal with Haley and Aldrich.
What was the name of the firm?
Haley and Aldrich.
Okay. You can go ahead and get started with the presentation if you'd like.
Oh, excellent. So as I said, principal with Haley and Aldrich. We have been here in Annapolis for just over 2 years, a 20-year resident of Annapolis. Brownfield redevelopment is my field of expertise. I've worked on several brownfield redevelopments through Baltimore, Canton Crossing, Sparrows Point, Fells Point, Domino Sugar. So very pleased to be able to be a part of this project. Our agenda for this, we'll go over the site background in the phase one environmental site assessment summary. Just for a quick recap, we'll introduce the remedial standards that were applied as we did our phase two site assessment. We'll then give a brief summary of the phase two findings, what we saw out there in soil, groundwater, sediment, and surface water. We'll then review some of the planned future use that's been discussed, and then start a discussion on the remedial approaches that we might be able to use for a site based on what we saw in the phase two. We'll then also have a discussion on the EPA brownfield grant opportunities that there are for the site, and finish off with costing, variables, and timeline. And at any point, happy to answer questions.
Mr. I got your first name.
Hoadley.
Oakland. Could you back up a minute? You were hired by the city.
Correct.
Department of Public Works to evaluate the property.
Correct. Yes. So to characterize, to do a phase one, starting with a phase one environmental site assessment, that is a desktop study of a site. And then based on the phase one findings, which there's industrial and there's, there are recognized environmental conditions with the site, we prepared a phase two environmental site assessment. That's where you actually go out and you start collecting samples and you get empirical data for what the actual quality of the site is. All that in preparation for taking the site into the Maryland Department of the Environment's voluntary cleanup program, which is a program to provide liability protection and generate the redevelopment of brownfield properties such as the Spa Road site.
Well, that was where I was going with my question. How does the state MDE, I guess, play into this? Because we were aware that they had come in to evaluate the property. And now we're hearing that your company has also come in. And when do you coordinate or measure up your findings with what MDE has determined?
So the voluntary cleanup program, you have to apply to it. So there are state-led cleanups in the brownfield program. However, the voluntary program would always be using a consultant to take a certain property through the program. So the state, I do know how the MDE has coordinated previously on some of the phase 2, the historic phase 2 operations at Weems Whalen Field. But it's never formally been, before this point, been applied to the voluntary cleanup program. So this is really just the next step of getting it into and through the voluntary program.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So
Do you have
We have another
one more
question.
I'm
question,
sorry.
Alderman Renee?
So two things. One, can we get a copy of these PowerPoint slides? Two, I understand if we go to MDE, there's another organization, it's MSE or something, or MES something, that will actually come out and do an assessment of the cost of the cleanup. Does somebody have any information on that for us?
typically, the cost of the cleanup is not necessarily a driver in going through the voluntary cleanup program. You're fully characterizing the site, making sure that they think that you've fully characterized the site, and then you're proposing a remedial action plan to address what you've found at the site, and then you're giving them a plan on how you're going to implement that so that at the end of it, you've removed all potential human health and ecological risk from reuse of the site. You refer to MES as in Maryland Environmental Services.
Yes.
Not familiar with them having a role typically in going through they provide as a quasi-state agency support to MDE, but not typically involved in costing or any or developing independently like another cost as to what the remedy would be. It's usually internal with the consultant assisting the applicant, which in this case would be the city of Annapolis, applying to the program to take it through, and internally, assessing what the costs for meeting the remedial goals and the remedial requirements of the program are, and then weighing those with the benefit from redeveloping the property.
So I want to plant the seed before we get into your presentation. I did read the report. I don't pretend to understand all the chemistry, but I did read the report. But it seems to me, unless we're doing the ultimate remediation, no matter what goes on the site, that the level of remediation is to some degree predicated on the intended use of the property. And we can get into that afterwards, but we heard very interesting information from the director of the Housing Authority about future plans, which I knew nothing of, but they don't sound like it would necessarily require 100% cleanup for the ultimate cleanup. But those are questions that are in my mind, but we should really let you give us your expertise.
Oh, absolutely, and I think we'll get to the later at the as we start talking about costs, we can go into that and the different goals for the different uses. But just as a quick summary, the city's utilization of the site really goes back to 1910 when it was first utilized there was a landfill from 1910 to the mid 1930s. That was in the southwest corner, right down just here on the map. In the mid 1940s, or I believe 1940 or 1934, the city built an incinerator that operated for about 10 years, and that sat in this portion right here. During that period of time, the resulting ash from the incinerator does appear to have been landfilled directly adjacent to it. You can see it in aerial photos that there's, for quite a period of time, there's a kind of an open, barren area over here, which would kind of indicate that. But then shut down in mid-40s, shut down the operation of the incinerator. The next significant use was when it was redeveloped and with the Athletic Association, and it was at that point that they implemented and constructed Weems Whalen Field. Already had a nice big flat area. So Weems Whalen Field was constructed, and then moving forward to 1970, starting the public works operations on both the east side, where the former garages were here on the east side, as well as the garages and the operations over on the west side. Now the west side was looking at historical topos for the area prior to 1970. It does appear, and we have lithology cross sections from our borings through here, that there is a significant amount of fill material, up to I think 5 to 7 feet of fill material that was placed to grade the site, so that was good for operations. So there was a significant amount of site modification prior to 1970. And then, as has been pointed out, I do believe there was some historical significance going back to the Civil War that is also back down here in the lower quadrant. General Walton's farm was in that, just for reference.
So a question on the
Yep.
west side, was there any, could you tell if there was any of the incinerator ash deposited there, or is that just general fill?
Good question. No, nothing that we saw over here indicated that it was necessarily incinerator ash. There is a distribution of, and we'll get to what the soil quality is. Really, the primary thing that we have out here is a distribution of different metals, which are ranging in from naturally occurring to potentially deposition. There's always the potential that there's aerial deposition from when the incinerator was operational, but it doesn't appear it is much more of a structural fill type that would have just been imported to grade out the site and to bring it up to a desired grade, as opposed to the fill material and what we've seen in prior borings over on the east side. I believe it indicates that any ash was maintained on the east side in proximity to where the incinerator was. But yep, good question. So we did a phase one. There were two major findings to the phase one. What is identified at ASTM standard is a recognized environmental condition. That's the purpose of a phase one. And we identified two, one being the former landfill and the incinerator facility on the site, which could cause impact to the subsurface. And then the second one being historical use as the DPW operations, based basically on that there are former USTs, current USTs, hydraulic lifts, oil water separators, things that could have been sources for oil and grease products to have been released to the subsurface. And that was the premise for the phase two. So not to make this an eye chart, I apologize for the resolution here, but based on the findings of the phase one, we identified multiple sampling locations across the site to be able to make a statement as to the absence or presence of any subsurface impacts associated with those features. This is all done in coordination with the MDE. We prepare a work plan saying exactly where we're going to sample, exactly what we're going to analyze for, and the rationale behind each and every sample point. That gets approved by MDE to make sure that when we do all of that and give them the report on it, that they are happy that we didn't basically miss any locations and there are no data gaps. So these locations are placed in to be representative of different operations. There are several up near the current USTs and the former UST that was taken out over here in the vicinity of the in the area of the incinerator, as well as over near oil water separators and at the down gradient side of some of the operations at DPW. You'll notice no borings really in the center of Williams-Whalen Field. That is only due to the fact that there have been multiple rounds of shallow and intermediate soil sampling in Williams-Whalen Field, so we did not need to recharacterize that. We just focused on 2 hotspots where we had the 2 highest concentration from those prior reports. And then most significantly, kind of as a catch-all, we did surface water and sediment sampling along, this is the headwaters of Spa Creek that runs along the southern boundary, and underneath there's the bridge. So we did a total of 5 sampling points along there, so that, and also have down gradient groundwater monitoring wells. Should there have been anything released from the site that would have gone into the subsurface and into the groundwater flow is going to go from the north to the southeast. And these are basically kind of a catch-all to make sure that we would see any impacts from anything that might have been released over time. So we have groundwater, sediment, and surface water all on the down gradient side. Overall, the findings of the phase 2 were very good and did not identify any significant releases, free product, sources for vapor, chlorinated solvents, anything of that nature. It's mostly metals associated potentially with the operation of the incinerator, and semi-volatile compounds, which are most commonly associated with oil and waste oil and grease that would have been associated with the operation of vehicle maintenance and operations of DPW over the 50 years that it operated at the site.
I have a question for you before you get too far in the results. Just to clarify, the triangles are where you did the soil samples, surface soil samples. Is that right?
Correct, yes.
And then what are the dark circles? Presumably soil borings, the dark circles, and then you have the crosshair circles.
Those are wells. So it says MW.
What are they? Wells?
Wells.
Okay.
Yep, permanent groundwater wells.
Yeah.
Drilled down and installed to the top of groundwater, so they will identify any petroleum, any LNAPLs, lightweight oil that would be on top of the groundwater. Yep.
So the empty circles are the wells, and then the solid circles are the sediment.
Are
samples?
either sediment or soil borings. Yeah.
And how far down did you do your soil borings?
So soil borings in in areas where fill and waste was expected always went until we were into native soil, so that we could get a cross section and we could see exactly what the thickness of any anthropogenic fill was. So and actually, it's a good point. These 3 where all of a sudden this doesn't want to work. There we go. The 3 tangents that we have here are, we have done lithology cross sections, so we can see the actual cross section of how much waste and how much and at what point we get down to native. Basically, they show exactly what we had intended, that waste starts to be seen right here at the top of, right below where the former incinerator was, and kind of goes all along this face. It also kind of matches what the topography of the site is, that they placed most of their waste and their ash in this area. Similarly, on the other side, this shows that the significant amount of structural fill is all in this north area and tapers out before you get to the end here in the soil boring at the end of it. So, but they typically range between total for the soil borings was to 15 to 20, or I think a couple might have gone to 25 feet. So, yep.
What does that imply in terms of remediation? We wouldn't have to go down
Oh, no.
15 or 25 feet.
Nope. When we get into the remedial strategies,
Okay, I'll let you.
we don't have to take all that out. That it absolutely. We'll get to that point. So very quickly, remedial standards are all the findings that we get, we apply, we correlate to the Maryland Department of the Environment's residential cleanup standards most significantly. That is based on the most conservative potential reuse of the site. If it's going to be potentially residential, you have to clean up to a higher standard if it's residential than if it was commercial or if it was industrial. We also applied them based with all the metals to the anticipated typical concentrations. This is where you can have arsenic, for example, is a naturally occurring metal, but it can be naturally occurring above the residential cleanup standard. So you can have a site that has never been touched before, yet wouldn't meet the residential cleanup standard just because of the arsenic levels in it. So you try to really figure out from a risk perspective how significant of an issue is it when you have concentrations of these ranges of metals. Said groundwater, MDE standards, sediment, also residential cleanup standards, but sediment and surface water, our phase 2 does recommend at the end of it. We did have some identifications of metals and some semi-volatiles associated with oil and grease that we would do what is termed a screening level ecological risk assessment. So there's one additional level of assessment just to determine if it is a low, medium, or high risk for ecological. And so MDE has agreed that that would be a good next step for ecological assessment. Surface water, basically the same. We would use the EPA regional screening levels for the next assessment of surface water.
Okay, so say that again. So you said the sediment, the surface sediment, as far as your soil the samples from the surface, those you're saying have some level of contamination. It's the lower contamination and you're recommending another report to meet MDE standards?
Only with regards to ecological risk. So
Okay.
typically there's two different risk assessments. There's human health risk assessment, and then there's ecological risk assessment. Based on the very low concentrations and the distribution of them in soil and groundwater, there's no real need for a human health risk assessment because the corrective measures would eliminate any pathway, either because there's a building on it or has a cap on it. There's that eliminates the risk pathway for anything that we found in soils. With the stream, we would just need to quantify what if there's any ecological risk based on the on what we've seen there. So at this point, we would just recommend the ecological risk assessment as a next step for site assessment.
Well, can you go into a bit more detail as far as what you're referring to as far as ecological assessment? So the effect of the materials on the overall ecosystem, is it having a human focus or is it just on the ecosystem itself?
So you would take the analytical data, the concentrations that have been identified in those media, surface water, and sediment. They're put into a model, a risk model, and that will assess in a cumulative fashion, because sometimes it's not just one compound. If you have 4 different compounds all affecting an organism, that has a larger effect on it. What the model does is quantify that and then can say whether or not there is any significant risk to different ecological receptors. Those can be everything from invertebrates to larger mammals and anything that you may have. And so the output from a screening level ecological risk assessment is to basically say, based on the findings, you have X amount of risk for those potential receptors. So there's nothing significant in what we've found that indicates that there's going to be any significant risk to the ecology. It is just the way to quantify it and to make sure that that's not part of a scope of a phase 2. It's just something that if you were to see it, you're going to, like, depending on the results, if everything was non-detect, we would not recommend that you do a SLURA, but there are some detections. They're very marginal, they're very low exceedances. And so a way to quantify that and be able to statistically state that there is no ecological risk would be to do the screening level risk assessment.
But what's driving that? Is that a general requirement, or are any of the particular contaminants driving that? Your recommendation?
There's no particular. It's not based on any particular contaminant, or it's really to be able to state, statistically valid if the question was raised as to is there any risk to the ecology from the site. This would be something you could reference and say, based on the, and it all follows an EPA protocol. It's an EPA model that's used to assess the risk, that you've taken it through that model and you've, specifically quantified it and shown that there is, a low to zero risk to receptors.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can you
Alderman Arnett?
please, when we're talking about ecology, are we talking about plant life or things like that? We're not talking about people, because I consider myself part
Right.
of the ecology, but
Right. I think that's
Correct. So it's everything other than people. So it is organisms, it is biota, it is flora, fauna.
those squirrels.
Anything that would potentially uptake chemicals that are there. So it's the chain. You'd have a macroinvertebrate, and then the fish eats that, so typically you look at apex at the end of it, osprey or something, and all of that is factored into a screening level ecological risk assessment.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's based on your current levels and area of contamination, right? It's not based on post-remediation impacts, or is it both?
Yes, it's based on the findings of the phase 2, which is, a snapshot of what the quality of the sediment in the surface water is at the time that we collected that. And so, yeah, it's
So
based
you'd
on
be-
current conditions.
So you'd be using that to try to help inform what might be needed as far as remediation from the ecosystem level?
So if we were to run a ecological risk assessment and we determined that there was any medium or high risk, then there would need to be a decision made as to how to minimize that risk, which could be other capping mechanisms and some additional remedial action. But I will say that we are very low on the exceedances. There's a couple compounds from semi-volatiles, benzoate-pyrene and benzoanthracene, and things that we see that are exceedances. They have very low standards. So you very often see exceedances of these compounds. It is very common. And, if I had to, I would say it is very low probability that ecological risk is going to show any significant risk associated with it. It's really a best practice to make sure, should the question arise, that, you know, it was fully assessed.
Okay. And is that currently going to be in the proposal, in the grant proposal to be funded by the grant?
We do currently have a proposal in with DPW it's paused at this point in time as decisions are made. The screening level is not reimbursable under the EPA brownfield grant, because it would not be considered a remedial action. So it is a characterization. So that cost, it's not a significant cost. I think this SLURA is about $30,000 to run the model, to generate the report, to provide the report back. So it's a smaller cost. But it's a characterization cost. It's not a remediation cost. And the EPA brownfield grant is for remedial costs only.
Okay. And so
Yep.
presumably you'd be able to do it relatively quickly if it's running a model.
So as I was saying, Spa Road findings, we do have exceedances of some metals and some volatile organic compounds, both in the vicinity of the landfill incinerator on the western side of Spa Road, and also in the vicinity of some of the current and former USTs. We do see some exceedances of the groundwater standards as well. However, those are mostly associated with concentrations of manganese, which is a naturally occurring metal, and we do not see them in the dissolved concentration. So they're also ubiquitous across the site, which makes it they're not related to one source. They're all very manageable through common remedial practices. Yep.
Can you remind me again what UST stands for?
I'm sorry, underground storage tank.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Can you go back a second for that last slide? So, and you were talking about the west side. It's typical for, I'm paraphrasing, I think, typical of public work sites, some of the SVOCs and underground storage, use of petroleum, hydrocarbons. Okay, nothing.
So these are
Nothing
things
too
that
surprising.
have been associated with the operation of the DPW operations. Everything from maintenance, cleaning. If you go into any significant parking lot, you will find these similar SVOCs. Just having they're in asphalt.
Yeah.
But they're also, anytime you have vehicles stored, oil dripping onto you're going to have some concentration of these compounds. And the concentrations that we're seeing are in line with what we would see there, not from a spill, not from, 55-gallon drum being tipped over, or bad maintenance or bad practices, just, 50 years of operations.
Of an old
Yep.
facility that probably didn't have all the controls that
Yeah.
would today. Yeah.
This is, unfortunately, I'm sorry that it's not, these are all metals. These are all concentrations of metals with marginal exceedances of the standards that I just was talking about, as well as the typical anticipated concentrations. The most significant thing is that down, in the southwest corner, you can see that there's slightly more concentrations and compounds in the vicinity of these three boxes here. This is right in the area of the former landfill and adjacent to the incinerator. We do see slightly more compounds there, but there's still nothing that would require active remediation or anything other than a engineered cap or some sort of remedy to keep them in place and just remove the pathway so that they're not so they wouldn't be in thermal contact with future users.
So why do you think on the top left, the box for SB 100,
Mm-hmm.
It seems to have more than some of the surrounding, and it's kind of on the uphill, presumably. I can't tell with the
That's
topography, but-
a good eye. It's same in surface water, and when we get to the surface water, we've seen that there is the potential. So if you follow the trace of Spa Creek as it goes all the way back towards Chinkapin Round up here, there's residential properties on either side that back up to Spa Creek, and then when it gets to Chinkapin Round, there are several businesses and industries that are up there. We see the same thing in surface water quality. This is most probably an upgradient impact coming onto the site, coming down from those
So
properties.
it's uphill. It's not runoff from
Yeah, so this is
site,
the highest
facility.
point of Spa Creek right there.
Okay. So just to
uh,
point out to my colleagues, like that kind of shows you just the general level of contamination and urban runoff.
exactly, it is coming off parking lots and roadways, and it's just
Yeah.
hitting
A lot of,
Spa Creek and coming down towards our property.
so the yellows are presumably a little bit moderate levels.
Those are exceedances of the ATC,
Okay.
the typical concentrations. Again, everything is within an order of magnitude. There's nothing that is, 100 times or 1,000 times. And also, most importantly, none of these concentrations are considered hazardous. So when we get to looking at remedial costs, these are exceedances of the cleanup standards, but they would not, if we were to excavate that soil, it does not meet a hazardous concentration. It would not have, and cost-wise, would not have to be disposed of as hazardous material. It would just be a tip. It can't be reused as clean fill somewhere, but it can go at a much more reasonable cost to a receiving facility for any potential redevelopment of the site. So,
Yes, Alderman Arnett.
So I really like to fully understand the implications of that statement, because in thinking about some of the potential development, if it's not hazardous, does that mean that the soils can be hauled away and disposed of normally, or do we have to have special trucks and take it to special places?
there will be a limitation in the through the VCP. It cannot be used on another site on residential properties, but it does not. There's several iterations of soil quality. It can't be used on a residential property, but it can be used in DOT projects per se. So if we were hypothetical, there's a development plan. That developed plan is going to generate 100,000 cubic yards of soil, and we need to take that soil off site. We often, it can go to either a landfill, and it can be used as landfill cap material, or it could go to a DOT site, and it can go to beneficial reuse at another site for a relatively low transportation and disposal cost, as opposed to hazardous, which would have to go off specifically to a hazardous waste receiving facility and would be typically 4 to 5 times the cost. But nothing in the phase 2 indicates that any area of the site would have that restriction to it or generate that kind of a cost. You're typically looking at, for soil coming off from a site from this, $100 to $130 a ton for T&D. And we'll get to, when we look at the cost, that's the big variable. That's what kind of changes what the cost would be to redevelop the site, but that's also exactly the cost that a $4 million EPA brownfield grant can mitigate the cost of. So there's a lot of interaction there between coming up with the right development plan and how it can be dovetailed and integrated with the remedial strategy so that there's no impact to the development costs of the site, and at the end of it, you have a redeveloped site.
So I want to make absolutely sure, because I think what I'm hearing to me sounds like good news. When you say it's not hazardous, now that means if I walked over there, I wouldn't be exposing myself. If it's not hazardous, that means hauling the materials away. It can't be reused for residential, but as you said, it could go to a landfill. I mean, am I feeling the assurance that that will reduce the cost of remediation?
It is significantly less than if you had areas that were hazardous, yes. We redevelop sites frequently, and we will pre-characterize anything that's going to be excavated. We will, so that when it comes time to excavate it, it's live loaded into trucks and it's already pre-approved and it goes somewhere and everybody knows exactly what the cost will be. Sometimes there are areas that, you know, you may have a few thousand yards that are hazardous and it can be segregated out, and you make sure that you're only paying for hazardous removal of something like that. But in this, based on the findings of the phase 2, which is 28 to 30 soil borings across a large parcel, nothing has indicated that there are hazardous condition, anything that would have to go off as hazardous waste. So yes, that's again why I would say that, you know, everything that we've found is very manageable through a soil management plan that the MDE would approve, a health and safety plan that we would implement during the redevelopment of the site, and then working with a developer to plan it and quantify how much below grade they're going to want to go. It would, I'm sure, come out as a cut site. It would generate soil at some level. But if we work with them to figure out how much is going to be generated and what that cost would be, then we can mitigate those costs with the EPA grant.
Thank you. That's reassuring.
So I do have a question. If you go back to the metals soil findings. Yeah, this one. So you said none of them are hazardous levels, but I'm wondering what level or substance is requiring mitigation. Like if they're not hazardous, do these, just this slide, these metals, are they driving a requirement for remediation?
They are, from the fact that, so if you have, MDE is going to say it's all risk-based. What is the risk to a future occupant of this site? And if it's residential, then what's the risk to all age groups, to a child, to an adult, and in a residential setting? So they're going to want to eliminate the potential pathway of everything from dermal to inhalation to ingestion of soil that has an arsenic level at X. There are many ways to do that, and the simplest of which is to put an engineered cap on it with clean fill in landscaped areas, and then a parking lot becomes a cap. That in and of itself is a cap because you no longer have access. There's no pathway for that dermal contact or inhalation, as well as the footprint of a building, that the building becomes your remedial corrective action. So it's not an acute hazard, and there's a lot of terms, and hazardous waste oftentimes comes down is almost more of a DOT classification, and what's hazardous to transport and hazardous to dispose of. But it is that, and there's generally a 20 times rule where you, as long as you're with below 20 times of the hazardous concentration, you can be comfortable that nothing, when you classify it for hazardous waste, is going to come back as hazardous waste, and we are well below anything that would meet the 20 times rule in the concentrations of metals and semi-volatiles, which is really all that we've found at the site.
Okay.
So it's that rationale that lets me say that there are very manageable corrective actions, like caps, like placing and managing it just with the soil management plan. We track where all the soil goes. We know exactly what the concentration is, where it's going to be received, what its end use is, that it's not going to a residential place. that's not being used somewhere for, residential fill, but that it's a much lower cost to manage the soil that way. And it meets the voluntary cleanup program's goals.
So it sounds like, and I'm not saying this to minimize the risk, but it sounds like you're saying that there isn't any kind of acute risk as far as like a hazardous substance. If somebody starts to play in it, they're going to immediately come down with cancer or get ill, right? But it's over time, if somebody's living on the property and around these soils, they could potentially develop some kind of illness or
Exactly,
impact.
and that's how when they run a human health risk assessment for residential, you're looking at I think it's 18 hours of exposure every day for 20 years or something. I mean, that's the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And then for commercial or industrial, it's just for an adult worker for 8 hours. So it's temporarily it's much shorter, and it's a much lower risk. So you don't have to. The standards are lower for those end uses. And we're already associating and relating these to the most stringent residential standards, and still not seeing any areas that seem like they would present any kind of a hazardous waste scenario.
So just one last follow up on that. So are you saying? So it sounds like well, is there any specific substance and level that is triggering, or is it just kind of the cumulative, the general, variety level of substances that is driving the need to do the risk assessment and reduction, or is there a few like chromium?
It's
lead
the overall. It's the suite of compounds that
Right.
we've identified, the metals and the semi-volatiles that are within one time of what the residential cleanup standard is. So
Okay.
it's the absence of seeing any one compound at 100 or 1,000 times the
Yeah.
cleanup, which would potentially then be somewhere where you might have hazardous conditions in the subsurface. Barring and not seeing anything that has that is where we can really have a confidence level to say that we can, regardless of what the development plan might be, whether for whatever use, whether it's commercial, residential, office, recreational, there are industry standard remedial strategies that we can implement and integrate with any of those developments to eliminate the risk, meet the voluntary cleanup program, and be compensated for through the EPA Brownfield grant program.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
Alderman Arnett?
trying to think backwards from the ultimate development of the property, I think I heard you say that streets would be considered a cap for this. Structured parking, 2 levels of structured parking. Is there a kind of a laundry list of things that we could be looking at that would be likely to go here on the site that would take care, in and of themselves, would take care of remediation?
Yeah, so all those features and that hardscape on top of that, eliminate any pathway to the soil are features. When you get into adjacent landscaped areas, that's where there are a standard cross section where you typically have a minimum of 2 feet of clean material between. Over top, you have a geotextile with about 18 inches of a clean fill material and 6 inches of topsoil that you then vegetate, and you do need to maintain that.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some maintenance of caps when we remediate a site under this, and then the proper implementation of a soil management plan during development, where we would pre-characterize, make sure that we are disposing of any generated soil appropriately. We track thousands of manifests from trucks, and those are all submitted to MDE at the end as part of our completion report for the voluntary cleanup program. And that is the remedial strategy for the site. Nothing out here that would really, no groundwater contamination that would need a pump and treat system or an ongoing remediation system, groundwater capture, anything of that nature. It's really just these, surface remedies and an O&M plan to make sure that they stay in good condition moving forward.
Thank you.
Yep. Let's see. So same here. We do. So these are VOCs and these are petroleum related compounds. Basically, we do have two areas. There was a former UST up in this north corner. We do still see some residual TPHD, total petroleum hydrocarbons, and some related petroleum compounds there. But again, nothing that would require specific excavation. Likewise, in the southern point right here, and this is going to be where sheet flow of stormwater all kind of comes down to this. So it's not really any surprise that there's a slightly higher level and more compounds associated with oil and grease at this southern low point of the DPW operations over on the west side.
Is that in the stormwater
So
facility?
this is in soil.
Hmm.
So these are soil concentrations.
Yeah, but is it
But
in the soil from that stormwater cell that's at the BNP?
That it's actually just above the stormwater pond. We collected a sediment sample from the stormwater retention pond. So we do have we did characterize both surface water and sediment in the stormwater pond. Yep.
Yeah.
Why is this not going forward? Oh. I'm sorry, for some reason.
It freeze up.
Come on. I mean, it did it for the first 6 slides. Maybe, here we go. Let's try it another way. Oh, there we go. I'm sorry. We got it now. All right, groundwater, as we were just talking about. Again, we do see manganese, everything that I've already talked about with manganese. We do have both filtered and unfiltered samples. That just the much lower concentrations, if not non-detect, in the filtered samples, meaning that there are no dissolved concentrations in the groundwater, indicative of any kind of a source or a release of manganese. There are certain areas where we do see benzoate pyrene and some of the semi-volatiles that, again, are associated with oil and grease and petroleum products. Nothing that rises to the level of active remediation or anything that the VCP would make us actively remediate.
How come nothing's highlighted on that? Because
So these are, I mean, these compounds, there's probably 150 different compounds that are analyzed. These compounds are marginal exceedances of the MDE standard. They just are not a significant enough exceedance that would require, that the MDE would require active remediation of. Mostly because at the end of all of this, you're not going to be putting a drinking water well in here. City provides potable water. If you go through the voluntary cleanup program, when you get your certificate of completion, it has land use restrictions on it. The first one would be that there is no groundwater for potable, no groundwater use at the property, which isn't an issue because it's already in the city system. Here again, so this is basically just the sediment in the surface water, everything I was discussing about the screening level ecological risk assessment. There are some exceedances, and we would plan to do what's called a SLURA for ecological risk assessment. And these are the, again, the metals and the VOCs that we had identified in both the sediment samples. This is the where we see in sediment, we see some additional from upstream impacts coming down Spa Road. And then we see the same thing here in the surface water. We actually see a significant amount of metals coming down from up gradient of Spa Creek and from the residential areas.
I think Spa Creek Conservancy should take note of, presumably upstream systems would help.
They're not, I mean, every tributary is going to be, we're going to see this is.
No, I know. My point is
stormwater impacts,
that we should, it's a good reason and a good justification to focus on some of our restoration activities as far as stormwater management improvements. But to clarify, these are all surface sediment samples, right? As opposed to boring?
These are sediment and co-located with where we collected surface water samples.
Surface
surface water, yes. So actual water from flowing water from the tributary to Spa Creek.
Right, but the other one is sediment.
Sediment.
Or is all water? That's sediment, but how is that? Just surface sediment, or is it?
Yeah, so
boring?
it is collected from the top 3 to 4 inches of sediment that's in the trace of like under Spa Creek, basically. Yep. So those are the phase 2 findings.
Do you see any levels there that like are resulting that are abnormal as far as that might be a result from the incinerator use, or is that just kind of typical for urban?
What we would look for that is like gradients where we have an epicenter and we have a really high. And first of all, we saw no dioxins, furans, PCBs, or other very problematic compounds that you typically see and can see in combustion coal residue or other ash deposits. What's helping a lot there is that the incinerator was out of operation prior to 1950. So a lot of those compounds are not common and would not have been around prior to 1950 when they were really developed. So the age of both the landfill and the operation and the incinerator definitely have a positive impact on not seeing it's much more inert material that would have been going through the incinerator, but there would have been metals. So, and that's why we do, I think, see some of the metals are potentially from aerial distribution, and if you're running the incinerator, you're going to have the smoke from it going down around it, but and would also kind of speak to that they are fairly ubiquitous across the site. What we don't see is a strong gradient where we have one really high concentration and then it slowly decreases away from the concentration, which would look at some sort of point source or something that might be much more of a hazardous scenario. They're really just all across the board, and we see them in every area. So, yep. So the Maryland Voluntary Cleanup Program regulatory process. We've submitted an application. We have submitted the phase 2. We have received comments back on our application and the phase 2. No significant comments on the phase 2. The findings of the phase 2 or any data gaps that they feel like we didn't, like if we hadn't done sediment, they would come back and say, you need to go do sediment. Or if we hadn't analyzed for VOCs or something like that. No comments. And they're in concurrence that the only thing left would really be to do the SLURA for the ecological assessment. Really, the only comments and the only reason why it's not fully approved at this point is that there is a little disconnect in the legal description of one of the parcels. So when you look in SDAT, it does not match what we have. SDAT doesn't match what the actual parcel is. We're performing a survey as right now to rectify that and make sure that the SDAT description is in line with what MDE sees when they go into their files. And once that's corrected, will have the full, will be approved and will be in the program.
And this is an application to be in the program?
The voluntary cleanup program.
What does that mean for us to be in that program?
So this most significant thing is that it provides you with a state-approved remedial action plan that will say, so to reuse the site for X purpose, you are going to remediate all soil, groundwater, and any concentrations so that it is safe from a human health perspective and ecological perspective to use it for that purpose. There's a liability protection to the city for that. So that provides the city with protection should there be questions raised about the appropriateness of any reuse of the site. It would have the certificate of completion from the state saying that it was fully characterized, it was remediated, risk was eliminated through the pathway eliminations, and the city did everything in accordance with common practice for site remediation. That's probably the biggest. The other part is that the EPA, every state voluntary cleanup program is pretty much predicated on the EPA's requirement for states to have these programs. And so the EPA Brownfields Grant Program very much likes to see you going through one of the state VCP sites, and that they will use that, and that's positive points for you as you go into your Brownfield grant application process, that you're going to have a quantifiable and a very prescriptive remedial action plan that you can say, we will meet these requirements. Here's a timeline. Here's so it puts you in very good standing with the grant program as well.
Okay. And what you said you had to make, I guess, let them know our intended purpose, but what kind of assumptions were made as far as the intended purpose of the property, the remediation?
Great. Look, the anticipated future uses, and this is preliminary. There's a lot of discussion. And there are a lot of options. Big, from a very big perspective, is that if on the east side there were either commercial or municipal offices on the east side of Spa Road, of note is that the Weems Whalen Field parcel, the plan is to have that subdivided, and that would go into and to expedite the reestablishment of Weems Whalen Field. It can be its own participant in the voluntary cleanup program, and the remediation and the remedial strategy for that is really just to build a new field, and that will be its cap, a turf field with proper stormwater management incorporated into it, becomes the remedial action for the site, and then the end result of getting Weems Whalen Field back into operation with a new field, and that satisfies the voluntary cleanup program. I think the goal would be to take that, and that would stay under ownership of the city, and go on a slightly faster track than the remainder of the site, which we would have several options for, obviously, for redevelopment. The important thing to think is that whatever the development plan is, the soil management, the capping, and the land use restrictions are still going to be your remedial strategy. It doesn't change if it wants to. It's not like if you want it to be residential, you're going to have to put in some big remedial system. It'll still be some distribution of those remedies, whether it's residential, commercial, recreational, what have you. So just something to keep in mind. So the variables, and so here are some of the remedial
I have
options.
some questions before you get into that.
Sure.
From Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yeah, you talking about Williams Whalen. You said it has to be subdivided and then
It
treated.
is
Away from lot 1 into lot 2. right?
could
Okay, not subdividing of Williams Whalen itself.
no. Weems Whalen Field in its entirety would become its own parcel. so that it can be its own participant in the voluntary cleanup program and have a more direct linear route to a certificate of completion. So, which would expedite its
Answer. Alderman Finlayson, the subdivision is provided in the documents, and it shows the subdivision that we are doing for this property. It shows the portion that will stay as Weems Wellen and the lot 1, which will be the front, that will be conveyed.
Okay, but we're not talking about subdividing Williams Whalen.
No, there's no additional
Okay,
subdivision. The
that's what-
subdivision is to allow Weems Wellen to be its individual parcel.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear about that.
yeah. It generally it would follow the fenced area that already demarks Weems Wellen Field, and then that becomes
Thank you.
Alderman
So,
Burnett?
first of all, can we go back to the previous slide where we have the NERF?
Nerd?
So
Nerf?
I'm trying to think about timing here. I'm trying to think about how this could affect CNI and all the other things. So I'm trying to get a sense of the implication here, but this is a process that is already underway, right? This is separate from the
The
grant
grant,
application
correct.
from the Resiliency Authority.
It is its own process to go through. The city could go through the voluntary cleanup process regardless of getting a grant or anything. The transfer of ownership, it comes in with the brownfield grant because the city is the responsible party for the impacts that are out there. It was the city's landfill, it was the city's incinerator, no real way around that. And if you're the responsible party, then you're not eligible for the EPA brownfield grant. So that is what would necessitate the ownership transfer for the period of time that it would be remediated and developed prior to returning to the city.
So whenever you see in a flow chart arrows going back and forth, that's 30 days and then you do something and then 30 days more. Is there a sense of the time to get to the COC in this chart?
Yes. So once approved, we take the findings of the phase 2 and then we write a remedial action plan. And we're going to specify that a soil management plan would be established for the site that would be implemented during any redevelopment activities, and we would provide any potential redevelopment plans to the MDE to say footprints of buildings will be in this area and will generate X amount of soil to be properly managed. Landscaped and parking areas will be in these areas, and those will be constructed in accordance with these required cross sections that we would include in the remedial action plan. And then the timeline is integrated completely with the redevelopment of the site. So as the site is redeveloped, we're tracking all this so that when the foundations of the buildings and the landscaped areas are established and the parking areas are established, even before the building is fully constructed, we can start submitting our completion report because the area is now capped. So the area now has all the engineered controls in it to eliminate the risk. So we can even get our certificate of completion before the end of the development and the finishing of the building. Say if there's another 12 months of construction once you're up out of the ground with any buildings, we've often gotten our certificate of completion before the development is even complete.
So this brings up a very important point. We talked about it in previous meetings, but developing a plan is one thing. Developing the property, which I equate with construction, is a different thing. I'm getting the implication that construction can go on during the remediation.
The construction is the remediation. Is probably the best way to think about it, because the construction of the building and the building is the cap and the cap is the remedial strategy.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And the soil that you're generating while you're to facilitate that construction is being properly disposed of and being tracked in accordance with your remedial action plan. So it's a very nice occurrence when you're improving the site, and by improving the site you're remediating the site, and it's really the perfect outcome for the brownfield program. That's what they're trying to do, is revitalize properties through that. So so the construction is the remediation.
All right. So, and I want to talk about time, and particularly as it relates to the CNI, but what is NERF and what is COC?
NFRD, no further requirements determination.
Okay.
Not applicable to this scenario. If you had a situation where you weren't going to have, that you had such low concentrations and such low risks that they weren't going to really have you
Yeah.
do anything.
So we're not going down that path. We're going down.
They're not going to, MD. It's going to be a remedial action plan, and they give them the plan, give them our soil management plan, tell them how we're going to manage everything, and then implement it, and then report back to them that we've done everything we said we were going to do, and then we would get the certificate of completion. They both have the exact same liability protections, and they both offer the applicant the same benefits.
And COC is
Certificate of completion.
meaning completion of the remediation.
Completion,
And
yes,
then-
completion of the remedial action plan, and it's your clean bill of health letter that you get at the end, and that's what when it travels, it is recorded with the title of the property, so that if at any time you sell the property, it's recorded that that the property went through the program. It's got the certificate of completion. Any land use restrictions, like the groundwater restriction, would also travel with the property. That comes into play much more with developers and flipping properties and things like that. Not so much of an issue for the city, but so.
So just to make sure, part of the remedial action is actually also the construction.
Correct.
The construction is what puts down the cap. And
Yes.
on things like lawns and so forth they're not concrete or macadam or buildings, are there remedial actions for play areas and park areas and so forth?
There are. So in areas not covered by structures or asphalt or hard surfaces, there are approved cross sections of what an earthen cap would be in those areas. So you put down a geotextile marker fabric, and then you put certified clean fill down, and you have at the end of it you have 2 feet of clean material, so that there's no real pathway for a child playing in a playground to come into contact with any impacted soil underneath it. I mean, for one scenario, just to, there are typical construction diagrams, even for the root balls of landscape trees. You dig, and you also put a clean buffer of soil around root balls, utility corridors. Those are all things that we would include in our remedial action plan and coordinate with the design and the design of any redevelopment, and submit and be approved by MDE. Yep.
So the remedial action plan is the plan for future actions. How long is it going to take, or have you already developed the remedial action plan?
We have not developed the remedial action plan until we get our final approval into the VCP.
Which is back up there at the start.
Right, which there are a couple things, there's the SDAT, and then there's also a very nice letter from the EPA today. So the city is no longer, there was a stormwater, it's all resolved, but it was brought up in the review. So I would anticipate within the next couple of weeks, we have our final approval into the VCP. Yep.
So if you go forward a couple slides, this one. So, let's see. Is there a reason for the split as far as one side's residential, one side's commercial offices? Is that being driven at all by the remediation, anticipated remediation, or is it just as
No.
far as our intended potential use?
It is not tied to site conditions or remedial approaches in any way. We would use the same controls that we've been talking about if it was flipped, if it was commercial on
Okay.
the other side and residential on this side. That's much more a what's the best use of the property.
But okay,
So you have
so the costs
a
are kind of the
wide
same.
flexibility of how you could reuse the property, and it would not change how the remedy would
Right.
look.
Or the cost, presumably, at least
yeah.
significantly.
So if so we've talked most about of these already with soil management plan capping. One thing to keep in mind, we would recommend vapor barriers under occupied buildings. It is a very small additional cost to the overall construction per square foot of a building, they'd be passive. This would not be an active system. We do not have any significant volatiles or anything that would potentially cause a vapor intrusion issue it's just a best management practice to have a vapor barrier in occupied buildings at a very low cost and a very high reward. The land use restrictions, the groundwater use, there's a excavation notification and any land use, so you have to provide 30 days if you're going to dig, especially through a capped area, which is also why they put that marker fabric. So 100 years down the road, somebody's digging and they pull up orange marker fabric, they should hopefully stop and say, I wonder why this fabric's in the ground. But you have a notification outside of emergency utility repairs. You have to provide 30 days notification, and you have to maintain these areas of caps. So that's an annual inspection for cap maintenance.
So I have a question though, a couple questions. So as far as going back to the anticipated use, the split with residential one side, office on the other, so that's not being driven by the remediation per se, it sounds like. But what assumptions, why did the city pick that orientation? That might be a question for planning and zoning. As far as residential on the west side, as far as the east side, like, is there any particular reason?
Currently, we're utilizing the CNI plan.
Sorry?
We're currently utilizing the initial CNI plan. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize planning and zoning was here. Thank you.
So this is a conceptual use. The recreational is self-evident. It's where recreational land is now. The city is currently using the property on the east side. There is a storage or a fuel location there as well. The east side sets up quite nicely for a residential property with parking in the rear, not visible from the street. It allows for that property to be, I'm sorry, the west side, thank you, to be used for the in combination with the CNI redevelopment. Keeping the civic or institutional public space aligned with the recreational makes some sense from a land use standpoint, and because they're complementary uses.
So the west side, it sounds like you're saying that you're proposing that because of the adjacent recreational uses?
Well, on the east side, with the commercial / office spaces, it sets up nicely to complement the recreational use of the property, particularly if it's civic governmental space.
So,
all right. Is on that or something else?
no, on this, will we later on in this meeting be talking about this? Director Maddox Evans told us at the last meeting about structured parking on both sides and office space on both sides potentially, and then housing, and I'm trying to get clear where the C&I, it sounds like the C&I goes now on the Salt Dome side. Is that what the thinking?
Well, it's not yet determined, candidly, and we don't have an actual plan yet. Where it's a bit premature. What's focus here is on a basic land use scenario to set up how to approach the remediation strategy. But the city council has acknowledged that the Spa Road site generally would be available for use as part of the C&I redevelopment. And those plans will come together over preceding months as the city, the housing authority, and the housing authority selected developer work to do the optimum planning for the site. But what we would like to see at this point is reservation of the east side for civic governmental space until the city makes determinations about how much space it needs and what's the best allocation of that land use, how much square footage, what types of land uses are embedded in that. But it's conceivable that part of that might also be part of the C&I development itself, the actual housing component. But we're not there yet.
Well, I guess I have a little bit of anxiousness about that. And I am trying to think ahead. So commercial could be office, but it could also be daycare. It could also be Dock in the Box. It could also be mini mart. I mean, this is going to be a food desert area there. So I mean, I know it's a catch-22. It almost feels like you need to know what you're going to do before you need to know what you have to do, kind of thing. So we on the council, or at least I haven't really had out of a fully fleshed general concept. So I'm trying to figure out the lay of the land here.
And no one has a fully fleshed concept. We're not working with the concept. We don't have a plan. We don't have it. It's not detailed. Even the term commercial is meant to differentiate it from residential. It's not meant to signal that a daycare center is the optimal approach. What's the principle from the city standpoint is that this area have a use that aligns with the city's mission of consolidating office space in an efficient way. And until such time as we figure out how much we need, how much square footage, and what's the best arrangement of that, we can't be more detailed than that. And there's already a commercial element to this property on the side of the road with the fuel station. So,
but my takeaway from Mr. Hobley's presentation is, whatever the mix is, the remediation has to happen, and the construction of buildings and roads and so forth is part of the remediation.
Very much so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so, and I'm glad to hear, personally, I think that planning and zoning is on the same page. Because I do agree. That was my one concern I expressed, I think the last environmental matters or economic matters. I do want to see us preserve the right to be able to civically preserve the east side or west, but in this case, the east side for some kind of civic use. And no offense to HACA, but I don't include HACA in that. I mean city government itself, because I do think, again, it might need to be used for some kind of transit connection. But as far as HACA, I'm certainly open to allowing HACA as far as the C&I to use one side or the other, and in this case, the west side. But to that end, and to Alderman Arnett's point, as far as food desert, as I've said to you yesterday, I think, Director Kubrack, what I would like to look at in the future, and I know this is down the road, but it's potentially relaxing parking requirements to allow the HACA developer to add more density, more amenities on the existing property, as far as more, because that would allow them to put in more space for community grocery stores, other types of uses. Because again, if Alderman Arnett, we've had a conversation too. If you think back to some of the transit data we've seen, 80% of the people who use our buses don't have any cars. 20% have one car. Most people who use them are lower income as well. And so my point is, for a development that's going to include affordable housing, we should probably not hold them to a very strict, excessive parking requirement in order to give them flexibility to have, even if it's more adding potentially more density with their development. But it sounds like that's kind of way down the road. But
Yeah,
those are the kinds
that's
of
far
things to think
removed
about.
from where we are today, and this
Yeah.
is a step precedent to that because
Right.
those discussions never can't be operationalized until we get through this stage here. But I would encourage the city council to think about the possibility that through the cooperative planning and conceptual development of these CNI sites, there may be opportunities to make changes to the zoning code to bring about the best optimum development. The CNI is truly a city building moment for the city. The plan development techniques that are already in the code provide flexibility and discretion for the city council, but flexibility for the developer. So right within our code, we have the ability to make some changes and insist on certain standards. And it may be that code changes with respect to parking, for instance, make sense too, particularly if they allow for an overall better design of a project.
Right.
So we want to make sure that the city's code is equipped to guide the development into the optimum conceptual development of the CNI property.
Okay. And getting off of that, but related, so and I understand, Alderman, we will get back to, I'm getting back to the presentation, but as far as the development cap, the development is essentially, you're saying that the remediation, that the cap, that is the remediation and the cap of the pollution. But presumably as a part of that, at some point, we need to have somewhat solid plans as far as the development, right? Because it sounds like we still have some uncertainty, but I guess this is enough, you think, to be able to proceed with some of the grant applications as far as this level of generality?
Yeah, and if moving forward to the EPA brownfield grant, so Williams-Whalen Field goes on its own path, transferred the remainder of the property so that it becomes available, it becomes eligible for EPA brownfield grant funding. In our experience, and we did almost 20 of these last year at an 87% success rate with EPA brownfield grants, which is pretty good compared to a national of 33%. We would put in for the maximum amount available of $4 million, and that $4 million would be, if awarded, would be able to be used for remedial costs such as soil disposal, construction of the capped areas, the vapor barriers, everything that we've talked about, everything that is a capital cost for that initial development of the property. So we've that $4 million is the cap. That's the highest that the brownfield grant program goes up to. I'll just also note that this is the last year that there are brownfield grants available at that high level. They're still being supported, I believe, by the infrastructure bill, the federal infrastructure bill from back in the day or during COVID. So this is a great opportunity to take advantage of it before it goes away in this cycle. Typically, they ask for the notice of funding opportunities in September, and then the applications are due in mid-November. It would then be awarded in May of the following year, with the funds being available in, I believe, October of 2026. Would be a general
Sorry,
timeline.
say that again, October?
I'm sorry?
Could you repeat that? I didn't hear.
So applications go in mid-November. Awards are identified in May of the following year, which would be 2026. And then the funds become available typically in October of that next year, so October 2026.
Okay. October 2026 potential award. Okay. Do you have an estimated cost of the remediation based on what you've? Is that coming up?
So it's like we planned this. So costing variables in the timeline. The biggest driver and the biggest variable as we look at costs is what the the final design looks like. The volume of soil that is needed for excavation for whatever the final selected design is going to be your number one cost. If it's 1,000 cubic yards or if it's 60,000 cubic yards, you're having to manage that soil. You're having to pay transportation and disposal for that soil to an approved facility in accordance with your remedial action plan. So what comes into play here, obviously, are whether or not you say you have parking garages or if you have below-grade parking under some of the commercial or the office buildings. You're generating more soil, it's more cut, that's going to increase your cost. So not that they can't, those costs would obviously then be mitigated with the brownfield grant money, but that's how you kind of manage your costs as far as there's then also the cost for capped areas outside of the hardscaped areas. So integrating and having environmental very integrated with the design is incredibly helpful in these projects. So when we work with developers, we oftentimes, some sites where you have more problem areas and you have higher, you stay away from those and you try not to generate soil from those. This is a fairly uniform distribution, so it's really just working with the developer to see exactly predict what the volume of cut would be from the site. We can work with the inverts of whether they go two levels below grade or one level below grade with more surface parking, and how you distribute and meet the goals that way. So that when we go to implement this, they give us the grading design and the footprints for the foundations, and we would go out and we would collect in preparation. We'll pre-characterize any soil that's going to be cut and excavated. We would do soil borings on a frequent enough basis so that we can take the analytical from that, submit that to a waste receiving facility, have it all already pre-characterized, and then when it comes time to construct, we're excavating, live loading into trucks, and the trucks go straight to the approved receiving facility, and it's all predetermined. That's typically how we would go with that.
Do you have any kind of engineer's estimate as far as, do you have to request a specific amount in the grant application? As far as what amount of money you're looking for to pay for the RIP or the remediation itself?
It's based on what it is based in, like if you're just going to do recreational where you're just going to do plantings and there was not a significant soil generation or something like that, you would not have very good chances of getting the most reimbursement or the most grant money. But in a redevelopment where there is going to be a significant amount of soil management required, that does justify the amount of the brownfield grant. If that's
have you? What I'm getting to is like, do you have to supply an actual amount when you submit the grant request, or amount to cover X amount of remediation?
You do.
Okay.
You have a based on what on site characterization, knowledge of the site, knowledge of the impact of the site, what the phase 2, that's all factored into, and justification for why you ask for the amount you do. We've done some costing, and we know typically what it costs to put in a cap per acre per square foot, what cost per cubic yard of disposal is, and so we can quantify and we can justify a $4 million grant, we feel, for this. So it's not always awarded. I mean, we could put in for 4 million and they may approve for 2 million based on other applications. But we would feel, it'd be very reasonable for us to put in at the $4 million level.
So what's your estimate per side for the east and for the west?
Per side,
Yeah,
again, that would be dependent on the final design. So
I know, but
more
what's,
from
what's
the
the
east
actual
side
number? I
because
know
that's going to have.
because you said you anticipate, you think it'll fit within the $4 million grant, but what is the actual amount that you're going to tell them you think is going to cost to remediate the entire site that you're looking for them to cover? Is it just 4 million or is it
Correct.
more than that?
I mean, we would ask for 4 million. The final hard remediation costs, we cannot say without the design and without knowing the volume of soil that would need to be removed. Every ton of soil that comes off, in addition, changes your. So it's a little bit of the chicken and the egg, where without a final design, we wouldn't be able to give a final cost. I think we have worked some preliminary numbers with capping. I don't think they included any significant below grade parking volume, so that's going to come into play. So, I mean, I can't say whether the total remedial cost is under 4 million, because if we put in 5 stories of below grade parking or something, which we won't, but it wouldn't. That would be over $4 million.
But what are you going to tell the federal government as far as what you're looking for them to cover with the $4 million grant?
So typically, I mean, they have lots of municipalities that come with them with fairly general redevelopment plans, that there is going to be some types of buildings and they are going to need to treat soil, or they're going to need to dispose of soil offsite. And so it's not a formulaic. We don't have to tell them exactly how much soil we're going to take off. We don't have to tell them exactly what the footprint of the buildings are going to be. It is mostly conceptual. So, which may not provide a lot of comfort that then gets accepted, but that is the process for the grant program.
Okay. All right. So I guess because what I'm getting at is I would like to just understand in my own head as far as what the potential total remediation cost might be versus how much this grant is going to cover. Like, are we going to have a delta of $2 million, $6 million to do the complete cleanup? So we're going to have to find another $2 million to do the cleanup, or do we expect, based on the assumption we have as far as potential redevelopment, is this $4 million going to be enough, or is it going to cost $10 million? That's what I'm trying to get an understanding of, big picture funding.
I can just say, again, it's speculative at this point, because there's no, if you told me you were going to go exactly 12 feet down into the soil and we were going to generate an exact amount of soil, I could give you an exact remediation cost. But without that, I can't. Our initial numbers did come out somewhere between $3 and $6 million of looking at CAS. Now that included Weems, Whalen Field, which would be separate. So if you back that out, we were at about 3.5 million, give or take. Yeah. And if capping all the areas and putting in some distribution of buildings, it did not include below grade parking. So if we start to go in the final design has a significant amount of below grade parking and therefore generates a significant amount of soil that needs to be disposed of, the cost would come up.
Okay. All right. That's helpful. Thank you. And as far as like ownership and how this ties in, and the restrictions and requirements on the federal grant, if we were to get the federal grant, when can that come back to the city as far as ownership? Does it have to be fully remediated first before it comes back to the city as far as ownership?
at what point does it, the EPA, the grant money would not affect, the grant would not affect the timeline for the transfer of it back to the city. As long as, so there, I believe there's a 4-year period for the grant of the grant money, in which time the remediation and the redevelopment of the property would have to occur. So is the question, or does the city ever get the property back?
Well, I mean, kind of, because the remediation is going to happen with the development. So we need to be, at some point, we need to solidify what actual development's going to happen on the property, because that,
Correct,
to
yeah.
remediate it, right? And we have a lot of balls in the air as far as we don't even know yet how far CNI is going to go. We don't know yet as far as, the feasibility study for putting in the transit, like a trolley facility, as far as a trolley barn there. We don't know yet what our hard plans are for each use, right? They could be, CNI could happen, and who knows, either of them could happen in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, we don't know. But it seems like we have to solidify that. Like, what period of time we have to solidify those at some point, so we can actually say, look, we have a plan to do X development. That's going to be the remediation. But again, like, do we have to wait until that? Can we get the money from the federal government and then, Resilience Authority, get the money from federal government and then give that property back to the city at that point, and they would still do the remediation with the money as far as during the development process? Or do we have to wait until the development is 100% done and remediated until it comes back?
Okay.
So you'll need to have the grant will need to be closed
Closer,
out.
please. I can't hear you.
Jeez. I hate this microphone. So you'll need to close out the grant, which means the remediation will need to be completed. As Dan spoke about earlier, you could still be under development where you're constructing the buildings, but the remediation portion that's tied to the development would
Right.
need to be completed,
Right.
and the closeout of the grant completed for the property transfer. And based off the grant timing, we're estimating that to be 7 years. If it's executed prior to that, I believe there's language placed into the document now to allow the property to revert back sooner.
Right. Okay. So hypothetically or potentially, you could say, if we have, if we're moving along with some development plan for one side or the other, we kind of do. If we have CNI that finds the money it needs, and we can proceed around on the west side, as far as the transportation improvements or city facility improvements, if we have a plan in the next year or 2 years, we can move forward with that on independently. As far as, I mean, the part that I still am trying to figure out in my head is, if we do separate proposals, it would be under ownership of the Resilience Authority, but the cities or HAC is going to have interest to develop it while it's owned by another entity as a part of the remediation. I'm still not, presumably, I guess that would mean that the parties involved, be it, I don't know if it come from the Resilience Authority or the HAC or the city through the Resilience Authority, would submit a development application, creating permit, site design plan, so on and so forth, right? That's the kind of process. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work while it's under ownership of somebody else. Is that, if you understand?
Alderman Savage, thank you for your question. And we did provide, we had a chance, and again, I apologize for missing the earlier meeting.
Yeah, no problem.
So we did have a chance to listen to some of your comments about some of that uncertainty, to sit down with our legal counsel, who actually used to be the legal counsel for MDE as the Department of Natural Resources. She has some familiarity with this program, and that our role here, in some of the language that we provided in Ashley earlier today, clearly lays out our role specific to the Brownsfield grant, the requirements as we develop the remediation plan, in terms of this is what's going to be covered under the Brownsfield grant and our role to that. And then as the terms and conditions of that grant are met, that would immediately turn back to the city or transfer back to the city. So on your question about would we undertake the development, and this is something we'd work with the consultant on, is there are aspects that we would do with the Brownsfield funding, that would not be a development, as part of, the natural spaces that we'd want to look at doing the soil remediation plan, soil removal, that type of stuff. And there are components, whether it's commercial or residential, that are a part of a development envelope that we can include in as a part of the remediation that we would cover under that grant to make the site ready for that. And then at that point, once those terms and conditions are met, that would transfer back to the city. That makes sense. There's some language in there that she provided that might help provide some of that clarity.
Yeah, no, I understand. But I guess at that point, if a development proposal is intended to move forward, the applicant, which would, I guess in this case, be the developer, which would be either HACA or the city, I guess presumably would have to come to some kind of agreement with Resilience Authority that you're going to allow us to submitting an application to ourselves, but we do that anyway currently, right? To do active development. I guess that's going to require a potential future agreement down the road.
Yeah, and I think in the grant application would be identifying those spaces that would be remediated through redevelopment and would be remediated as part of soil treatment, et cetera, that we'd cover through the grant. And I think whether or not that decision in terms of who's going to develop it, what's it's going to be, et cetera, I think, we could close out the grant application in terms of total costs as far as what can be covered through the EPA grant. That we follow that logic. But I think a lot of that kind of comes out through the application process as we start kind of developing those pieces.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The Housing Authority, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
Yes, I just wanted to provide. Hello. Okay. I just wanted to provide some insight as to your question on the timing, because the timing of when necessary, let's say, legal documents with regards to the overall development on the various parcels of land involved in the overall CNI project. That type of work we're looking at being finalized earliest 2027, maybe 2028. So with regards to land transfers at all, with relation to the overall residential and commercial development. So it's not a factor right now. In order to even get to that point where we're clear on what the city is able to contribute to the overall CNI, as far as Far Road is considered, we need this work done because we really don't know the extent of the entire site or part of the site, or we don't know without the environmental work to begin, and that will inform the extent of the redevelopment and a number of the things that I mentioned last time before the Rules Committee. The extent of the residential, the extent of the commercial, the types of commercial use, the types of open space, green space, types of parking schemes. So all of that, as well as transportation. So, but we can't get started without knowing the assessment of whether this is even feasible. And so this is the crucial beginning point of us being able to move from conceptual to that nitty-gritty planning in which we get very specific, in which we will come to you several times over to get various approvals for various aspects, whether they be zoning approvals, density approvals, transportation related, public works, or infrastructure. There will be a number of approvals related to the overall project that will come to you over the years. But the starting point with regards to the Sparrow piece is the environmental. So we need to know what we're working with and the extent and whether this is feasible. And that is the importance of this part. And also with regards to the framing of CNI. CNI is not a separate project. It is the project. So part of, from HUD's perspective, I'll give you from a HUD's vantage point, part of the CNI work is the resiliency work. That's part of this. And it will be many other types of work. CNI is just a broad descriptive for all of the development and / environmental / residential / commercial work that goes into this overall project, which it will include when we file our implementation application for CNI, we will include all of this work that is being performed to show HUD that we are engaged in a neighborhood redevelopment project. And this is an aspect of it. So I just wanted to help with the framing because it's not a separate project from this project. This is sort of the beginning stages of us even qualifying to compete for a CNI, because this will show HUD all of the local corrective actions we're doing and all of the legwork we're doing to get this site ready for commercial, mixed use, residential, et cetera. Also, with reference to, we are using the basis of your resolutions, the 1924, the Eastport CNI Transformation Plan, and also the R2022, specifically with regards to Spa Road, as the basis for the work that we're doing now. So this actually is an extension of what you have started as a council, as far as all of the exploratory work that goes into trying to figure out whether or not this could be incorporated, this particular piece of land could be incorporated in our overall choice neighborhood, or especially with how things are going with the administration, a choice neighborhood like project. Because, even CNI funding is not certain, but our transformation plan indicates that we are pursuing a CNI and or CNI like project in terms of the scope and the scope of the overall neighborhood redevelopment task that we're going to take on with this overall project. So that's all I wanted to state with regards to that.
Thank you. That is helpful. And Alderman Arnett?
Yeah, so I just want to get a little bit of clarification and then ask a couple of questions. But I thought CNI was basically a competition for $50 million. It's not the whole redevelopment of Eastport Terrace Harbor House.
Yes, it is.
It is. So, I thought the redevelopment of Eastport Terrace Harbor House was much more like $250 or more $1,000. It's not just $50,000.
No, we anticipated at the beginning stages that this may be an overall $300 to $400 million project.
Right.
Encompassing Eastport Terrace, Harbor House locations, and Spa Road.
Right.
And so it's all of it. So it's not, and all of it will be happening in different stages. So for example, depending on the type of work that needs to be done with regards to remediation, if we believe remediation is feasible, the staging of that will dictate at what point or what phase. This will be, let's say, at least a 3 to 4 different phased projects. So let's say we may not be able to get to significant construction on Spiral till phase 3, for example, or phase 2. But we don't know any of that information yet because we don't know what needs to be done there. It's ambitious for us to think it will happen in phase 1. But for purposes of our application to HUD, we outline the phases and what we think we will be engaged in each phase. So HUD has an idea of when to expect what. And so that type of information we would be looking for within the next year or so, as far as when do we think this would be viable? Is it in 5 years? In 7? So that's where we'll place it.
Right.
And that's where we'll stage the ask as far as the HUD funding related to that.
So I agree it's ambitious to think phase 1, but thinking about logistics, it really would be good if we could do it in phase 1 because that would help you relocating people here. And so then you can get over to the Eastport Harbor. So
Correct.
again, I want to reassure the same question I asked you at the rules meeting. The timing of this, it's all over the place. But I don't know if you can reassure anything, but I'm hoping that our timing for the remediation is not going to be a problem for the redevelopment of Eastport Terrace and Harbor House. Seems like you have lots of latitude in how you phase things. So,
Well, these projects take 5 to 10 years
right.
to come to fruition. So from our standpoint, we just need to know at what stage or what year do we think
Thank
this
you.
would be viable, if it will be viable. And then we could put it into our overall plan.
Well, so I have a question for consultant again. So is it going to be a problem for the grant if the remediation or the development or the remediation is going to be potentially not until 10 years down the road? Was there a certain time you have to use this federal money up by to do the actual remediation?
I mean, I believe the target is 4 years.
4 years.
So just to clarify, if there was a development plan today, we could prepare a remedial action plan in accordance with a development plan and have that, in short order, and take the next step. So we have the findings, we've characterized the site, we know the risks associated with the site, we know the concentrations, we know what, everything that MDE will want to factor into approving or not approving a remedial action plan, with the one potential addition of completing the ecological risk assessment. But with that, we would be able to submit and we would be able to write a remedial action plan saying, here's the development plan for whatever portion of the site. It's going to have, this is the layout, this is the buildings, these are the parking areas, recreational areas, whatever it might be. And this is how we are going to implement and how we are going to implement and track the remedial action, i.e. the capping, the removal of soil, and have that. So we have all the data that we need to take that step of writing a remedial action plan now.
Right. But yeah, it sounds like you're saying that we do need to use that federal money up. But again, so does that essentially mean we have to complete the remediation within that 4 years? 5 years?
I
whatever it is?
think there is an allowance for extensions, and once, they don't, you have to show progress towards the remediation, but there are many projects that do go beyond that 4-year period, but it's written, it's a 4-year period.
But I guess, but we may not even get started with any of it for 4 years, as far as even groundwork for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. So, I guess, so so it comes down to one of the questions I was thinking earlier. Do we need to reframe this and plan for doing the remediation first, as far as separate from development? Just plan on doing a remediation based on a certain level of assumptions. We'll assume, I don't know, one level of underground parking, do the remediation to that level. And I know that would require filling in the site, which would cost extra money, but it would allow us to ensure that we use this federal money and not have to worry about rushing along or losing it at some point if our development plans get pushed out or delayed. And I'm wondering, how much is that going to cost? A significant amount more of money, or is it something we could?
Generally, we just wouldn't know where to excavate. would be the challenge. Like, you could cap the whole site, and you could either take off, you could install earthen caps across the site. You are then going to have to go through those caps when it comes time to develop, and then you're going to have to, it's definitely going to be more an additional cost than establishing a development plan and then integrating it and doing it in one foul swoop. But you, and without a development plan, that's the mission of the EPA Brownfield grant, is to have a development plan to then, so that that they want you to, so it would diminish the opportunity and I think the viability of the site for getting the grant.
But it seems like that's a potential fatal flaw here, because I'm assuming that in most cases when people submit grant applications for brownfield, that they have a pretty solid plan in mind. Because we don't have
They
a
at least
solid
have
plan.
a conceptual design idea for the site.
Yeah, we have a lot of unknowns as far as when and if we're even going to be able to get to the point of developing. That's my concern. That gives us a 4-year timeline to do something to get the remediation completed. City Manager?
Just to point out that the grant wouldn't start until October of 26. So from
Correct.
today, it's
Okay.
5 years, right? Which I think that's actually a reasonable time frame. I don't.
Well, I think
Obviously,
that- yeah.
that's not something
Yeah.
for us to neglect, but it's 5 years from today, and
Yeah,
we
that's
just
a good
need to
point.
keep that in mind.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, and I think you're right. But I think it's just it's a key factor to get out there, because we have to frame all of our development plans, I think, on developing those properties first, whatever it's going to be, because we don't want to lose that federal money. So even with the HACA, we're going to have to look at that first to get that remediated and whatever we want to put there. Just because otherwise we're going to have to figure out I mean, how confident are you that how many unknowns are there as far as HACA what's the chance of this not going anywhere? And I kind of need a frank assessment of that.
We would be very glad to redevelop Spa Road, have it included first in the first phase.
Mhm.
We would be ecstatic about that. And so we just need to know what is the what? What is it that we need to do as far as the ability to include that in the first phase? And so, so we would be more than glad to do that. We have conceptual plans. We have conceptual site plans for Spa Road, for Eastport Terrace Harbor House. We have those things. We will need more information to move it to actual specific, very detailed plans. And that's based upon the information that we need from this assessment. And so we've already mapped out many other issues related to the overall redevelopment, which the types of units, income ranges, types of housing, different styles of housing, home ownership possibilities. We have all of those things mapped out with regards to what we can do. It depends on environmental constraints and funding.
What kind of funding
So-
do you have now currently lined up, committed?
We have $1 million dedication from the city.
Okay.
We have $1 million dedication from the state that's matching. And we have a developer that can self-fund a project, which is significant. And so, to the point that state funding isn't as crucial.
Mhm.
We will be still applying for tax credits, but we went through a very extensive solicitation process to find the types of developers that could do large scale projects
Yeah.
and fund them and bring the equity that's needed to perform them, and we did. And so from funding is always an issue, but we are confident that the redevelopment can be accomplished. As we perform each phase, we know we will acquire more funding because people will see what's being accomplished. And so we have these things, and they're not just HACA and the developer. All of the actions that I'm talking about have been done in conjunction and in partnership with your staff, with the planning and zoning department, because this is not a HACA project. You know, this project has 3 developers, HACA, the city, and our private development partner.
Okay.
So that's how this project should be viewed, as a 3-party developer project. And so really nothing we have done has been in isolation from the planning and zoning department and other departments. So they are as educated on what the overall plans are as we are, because we create them in tandem. In fact, the city staff participated in our selection of the developers, and we did that purposefully.
Okay.
And so so we're ready to go. So if things are great and there's better news than we anticipate with regards to Spa Road, that we will be more than happy to move the redevelopment of that particular site along.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And I'm going to try to get things moving a little bit here.
Yeah.
You're out. We will get to that, but I need to get to Public Works, City Manager. Sorry. Okay. You can get in touch with us after the meeting.
So your questions are very valid and important to consider. But what we're looking at here with O2025 is whether to vote on this legislation, to whether to transfer ownership of the property to the Resilience
Right.
Authority in order to do this project. That money will go away at this level this year. We're not likely in this administration to see any additional funds, I think, for brownfield redevelopment projects. So we shouldn't get too bogged down on what are the specifics of the redevelopment. We have plenty of environmental characterizations of the site to apply for the grant, and the conceptual potential development is sufficient to apply for this grant. So we have what we need in hand to apply for this grant, which is an opportunity right now, a deadline we do not want to miss. We want to go forward. With all of the planning that's been involved with this project, I really don't see a danger of the city not going forward with it. I think that would be pretty far-fetched at this point, and that we would not do it within the next 5 years, have a concrete plan and be ready to move forward and start doing the work within that time period. So I just urge you to focus on what we're here to vote on, which is the legislation involving the transfer. The rest of the details for this project will develop quickly thereafter and are already in progress with MDE.
Yeah. I agree. But I think getting all this background helps give us a lot of comfort and understanding as far as the big picture. But what it's going to come down to is whether or not we need to take action today on this, right? Because personally, there's a lot to mull over. We just got some new amendments today. It's already almost 5:30. We have new amendments to review. So my question to staff is going to be, do you feel like we have to make a decision today? And if so, why? Because ideally, I would want to wait until, even if we have to schedule a special meeting in the first week of September, I'm fine with that. Can this wait until September for us? Because we have stuff to go over. I would like to have time to go over the amendments with my colleagues, with staff, and figure out what we may need to propose. And so that would be doing the committee meeting, again, first week of September. We get that approved, get that on the agenda for the first meeting in September. I mean, again, I haven't heard any kind of opposition as far as, I think everybody's on the same page as far as wanting to try to get this grant money. But I think working through some of the details of the legislation. So as far as moving forward with putting together the application, go ahead, go for it. I would say, I don't think I've heard from anybody any concerns in that regard. But can you wait until, as far as this legislation, until getting that approved at the first meeting in September? Does somebody have the answer to that?
Property together.
I don't.
Well, there's always time, and we can always add time to decision making, but there are a lot of eyes on this project and on this decision making process, including developers who are capitalizing and waiting for these decision making steps to conclude so that they can move forward. So what Executive Director Maddox Evans has described is real. There's a developer that is developing a financing package and negotiating a memorandum of understanding that are waiting for these types of decisions to be made. We would ask you as a standing committee to move this to the full committee or the full council so that you can hear it and make a decision. Because we're dealing with a private developer here. So the working relationship has to demonstrate that we're moving forward. And I don't know that much is gained from postponing. You've even signaled to the staff that you'd like them to continue with the application. So we'd ask that the standing committees conclude their work and allow the staff to move forward and allow the development process to move forward with the assurance that we're all working together, and to remove the doubt that will necessarily attach itself to a 2-month delay.
I mean, personally, I'm not comfortable with that unless I hear a very concrete reason as far as this can't wait until first meeting in September. I know the application is due in November. So again, I don't see why you can't work in tandem. I understand the desire, but that's kind of where I am. Alderman Ornett.
Thank you. So I have to admit, today, and particularly your presentation, thank you for that, has filled in a lot of blanks and has really been pretty reassuring to me. I'm relieved to hear we're not in a big hazard zone. I'm frustrated. I mean, the administration could have come to us before now. I mean, I'm feeling the bum's rush to make a vote on Monday night. And we're just now starting to get a sense of what's going on. I'm not directing this to you, certainly, for your presentation, but again, I think what Alderman Savage and I believe Alderwoman Finlayson, we want this to be a success. We want the CNI to be a success. We want to get the site remediated and put into productive use. But I will just say for myself, I feel a fiduciary responsibility to my constituents and the constituents of the city writ large that we know what the hell we're doing. And I get it. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that are uncertainty because you can't know A until P falls into place. But I agree with Alderman Savage that we'll see how we go today with looking at the amendments, including the one we just got from the Resiliency Authority. And I'm perfectly willing to meet even in August to make this move along. But what I'm going to want to hear from Matt or somebody is, what is the real crunch? Where are you in terms of already developing? I can't believe you're not already thinking about developing the grant application. And, what is the latitude we get here at the 11th hour to be thinking through some of these things? I'd actually like to hear from Mr. Rogers about anything that would help us in terms of a decision making. I'd like to hear from Mr. Clemens about the kinds of thinking that could go into the legislation. We actually have heard, we've gotten some gratuitous legal advice, and I appreciate that. But we're still grasping to try to figure out where the heck we are. And I think the ask from me, and I think from Alderman Savage, was, what is the time frame? What is the urgency? Is Monday the drop dead date? Does the money go away if we don't do something on Monday? Or just what? Because this was just dropped on us. And with a lot of no information, a huge lack of information that we're starting to get now. So I think we're trying to figure out where we're going, where you are, and how the pieces all fall into place. And we'll look to Matt to tell us from the Resiliency Authority. But
if I could just address one piece, and then Matt, you want to jump in. In terms of the time frame, in order to be eligible to apply for the grant, the actual transfer itself needs to be completed, which means that the entire process of affecting that transfer, having that recorded, and all of that would have to be completely done
Bye.
by the time that grant application got submitted. So they'd have to own it free and clear. And so in some sense, because there is some uncertainty about how long it takes to actually get the land records themselves processed, I think that's part of why you're seeing a little bit of urgency on our side, is to make sure that there's enough time, particularly given the August recess and stuff like that, to make sure that there is enough time to actually get through that entire process so that they are in fact eligible to submit the grant in the first place. So it's not just that we've agreed, it has to have been effectuated.
so
You
we
may
need
have.
to hear from Ms. Leonard, because we did hear at a previous meeting about doing the subdivision into Lot 1 and Lot 2, where that is, how much time that's going to take, because, again, we don't even have the parcel set up. So it feels to me, but thank you, Director Matt. Thank you for your input.
Before Miss Leonard, I would need.
I'll wait until-
Okay.
yeah.
All right. you're good.
So what is the specific question, Alderman?
The question is, we're cleaning up something with SDAP, but we're also doing a lot subdivision to Lot 1 and Lot 2, which is Weems Whalen, and there's something else in the northwest quadrant
Yeah.
that also has to be cleared up, and that's in process. So you're
would-
working on it.
That, in order to clear all of that up, we do, and again, Ashley Leonard, Assistant City Attorney, in order to get the new tax ID numbers for all the different parcels, you have to have a recorded deed. It
Right.
takes, on average, about a month to get a deed processed through the city, 2 different levels of the county, and then into land records. So there is some urgency in that, because you can't rush that process. We will submit the deed. You can hand walk the deed around, but they're only going to process it as fast as they want to. And we have to go to 4 different governmental entities to get a deed processed.
And you can't do that until the ordinance is passed?
Well, yes, because you need the ordinance passed to authorize the sale. We'd have to sign the deed, and then I would have to take the signed deed. It has to go to our finance counter, which I can expedite a little bit, but then it has to go to 2 different Anne Arundel County departments. and then it goes over to the courthouse at Land Records.
So,
And so that takes about, even if I'm hand walking it, and I
Right.
can hand walk it, I can get it through the first 3 steps in about a day or so. But that last step, getting Land Records to actually process the deed through, could take up to a month. Sometimes it takes less, sometimes it takes more, and that's sort of a unknown.
right. So best case. And that means until that's done, the grant application can't be submitted.
That is my understanding. That yes, we're going to need to show them. Generally, when I've never done a grant with EPA, but when I've done other grants, and you're talking about ownership, they want to see a recorded deed, not just a signed deed.
So the linchpin here is passage of the ordinance with calling for this lot subdivision, and then it also
Yeah.
authorizes the transfer over to.
And then we could have the closing. We could get the deed
Right.
signed, and as soon as we're ready to go, I can start hand walking it around.
So if we approve that on Monday, you can get going. If we approve it in September, you can't get going, and that really does. And I mean, I'm worried. Like,
Well, I would probably be running at that point, and then
yeah.
And
So-
then again, like I said, I know how to get deeds through the first 3 steps pretty quickly, but the courthouse at Land Records has its own process
Yeah.
and its own timetable.
I get it. And then after this is done, I mean, simultaneously, the Resiliency Authority can be working on, I'm assuming you're already thinking about the application, but you cannot apply with the lot subdivision until we've done that.
Yes, correct.
Right.
We need all that done.
And the deadline for application is in November?
That is my understanding. Yep.
Yeah. So if we pass it on Monday, you work through August and probably into September, we get that done, then the app, and is there any extra jimmies if you get the grant in early? Like if we had it already and you could submit it in mid-September, is that a good thing, bad thing, necessary, not necessary?
No discernible benefit to it. They all get reviewed under the same point system
Same time.
generally. Yeah.
So the deadline really is some date in November. Yeah.
Correct.
All right.
Do we know what date?
To the VSP, that part of the program, to me, that's the big point system in terms of getting this into the grant,
Right.
which is fairly imminent.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the real urgency, I think, is getting the authority to do the lot subdivision.
Which means, 2025.
Correct. Yeah.
I think my concerns have been the same as my colleagues. Today we got more information, thank you, Ms. Oakley, than we've had up until this point. When there was when there was crucial information that we just learned about as far as the timeline is concerned. And I think we're all sympathetic. We want to get this done. We're supportive, but we've been kept in the dark. So, forgive us for trying to shed some light on a decision that we have to make. And, I don't know, you can't point fingers, but we've needed this type of information. But we still have amendments now that we haven't begun to discuss 2 hours into our meeting. And maybe I'm the last minute Jane. If we approve this in September, first week of September, as you mentioned, there's still 2 months to get it through the process. Ms. Leonard just outlined the process for getting it on the MSTAT. So there still seems to be time. Now, if you guys feel you can give us the information that we need in the short timeline that we have, I'm sure we would be willing to support it. But we can't do that unless we're comfortable with what we have in front of us. So who's going to go next?
Yeah. So, and that I think I agree entirely. And I think the point is, I think somebody's the phrase was used that there's somebody's going to be running, staff's going to be running to get this done. I get it, but at this point, somebody's going to be running, either staff in September or the council now. And I know it's, and I do really appreciate the presentation. It's very good information. As my colleague said, it would have been more timely, I think, prior to introduction. But we also have to think about constituents, right? What is expected and fair to constituents? Are they going to want us to try to get this done in a very timely manner for Monday? Potentially with the perception of being rushed through, because we are going to have to rush through amendments. You know, we do rely on our committees to narrow down amendments, and I don't know if we're going to have time. Because I'd have to completely revisit mine in light of all the information we've gotten tonight. So it's probably not even worth talking through mine. I'm going to have to spend time over the next few days on top of preparing for Monday's meeting and everything else on the agenda. It's a lot to ask of us too. So
We do have another meeting following this, well, a continuation of the rules committee, because we have
you
legislation
have
that
more to
has
do
time
today, too.
sensitive. We have to get.
So, so let's take a pause on that. We do have public testimony that we are committed to allowing. So if we could get public to line up perhaps and provide 3 minutes testimony, we may. Is that,
Mr.
sorry,
Chair, may
Alderwoman?
I ask, because
Yes.
the Mr. Fleming has some amendments,
yeah.
and I don't know whether the comments
I
would
got nowhere to be.
raise questions about the amendments or whether anyone else has seen these. I don't know whether it be.
And I can just capsulize real quick. I think those amendments, you know, we're offering those based on some of the comments we heard at the last kind of 2 meetings we've heard. And it's really just specifically kind of narrowing in our role, because I think there were some questions that you personally had about our role on this site and future plans, et cetera, to really trying to clarify the Resilience Authority role specific to this site related to the Brownfield program, that our role, we would transfer this back as soon as the terms and conditions of the grant is met. You know, in terms of, you know, working with the city as the implementing partner for things covered outside the grant, you know, just really some of the things that were raised in the last 2 meetings, we try to clarify in some of those amendments. And I think they do, some of them, Councilman Savage, align with your amendment in terms of, you know, the transfer of the project. So again, it was just really reflecting, I think, what we heard, and then getting some advice from our council in terms of addressing some of your concerns.
Well, if I might add, and I did a cursory review of them at the end of the meeting, and there were 2 questions, probably others if I had read it more closely. Several of the whereases in your amendments are simply expounding on the facts.
Recitals, yeah.
Exactly. But on the, I guess it's the 6 whereas, where you talk about you've entered in a memorandum of understanding we have with the Resilience Authority, which we couldn't attest to because we didn't know anything. We weren't familiar with that. So, you know, timeline, when did that?
Yeah, sure. So you, in essence, in part created the Resilience Authority to help work with the city, go after funding, provide a vehicle to support resilient infrastructure that were outside the bounds of what the city could do. So, you know, this opportunity came up, you know, so there was an opportunity here. We learned that the Resilience Authority could provide a structure related to specific to this Brownsfield grant. At the same time, we have an umbrella MOU that currently exists with the city that describes how we work together on projects. So something like Cars Beach, that kind of falls under that MOU. We work under that with the specific, we call it a project task agreement, et cetera. So it kind of, you know, specific projects describes what was envisioned with setting up the Resilience Authority related to our role and the city's expectations to those projects. One of the questions that we heard come up was, you know, how do we know what role, you know, the activities of the Resilience Authority, they're going to go off and do something different. we have an existing MOU, so we were just providing that as some context as, this continues to show that we are working in close coordination and partnership, and there's a vehicle in place that describes that, how we'd work together on this specific project and for this specific grant.
So that agreement came into play when we were in the process of creating the resilience.
Shortly after the Resilience Star was created, as we started entering into specific projects and working together, we worked on an MOU with the city, as well as we have a separate MOU with the county, and how we work together on specific projects.
Madam Chair, we can resend that to you. We can resend that memorandum to council so that you have it.
I'm sorry?
We can resend that memorandum to you so that you have it at your
Okay.
fingertips.
Yeah, but I misunderstood. I thought
Alderwoman Stahls, Lord.
No, is it about that,
it's about the MOU.
the
Yeah.
MOU thing?
I thought it was an MOU. I understand the general MOU understanding we have. I thought it was an MOU specific to this project, and that's why I was saying, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, understood.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it was basically it was within the MOU. There's a requirement for, it's in essence a project task agreement. So it describes that. So we would do a project task agreement related to this specific project again. So there was kind of that level of transparency of how we work together.
Okay. Speaking of transparency, we're talking about this arm's length. Are we really kidding anybody about the arm's length transfer? And speaking of sale, and we've seen discussion about calling it a transfer rather than a sale. I think we need to get into the details of that. I understand that we can't, as the perpetrators, we can't get help from the federal government to clean up our mess. So we have to go to you. I'm not meaning have to. I think we need to go to you. But I just wonder who we're kidding, but maybe we are.
I can just speak to the fact that we work with all the regions of EPA, specifically connections in Region 1 with the EPA, who we had conversations to this about the mechanics of it, so to speak. We would say responsible party, but as a responsible party, this, as long as you are not identified as the owner, and it's a non-responsible party that is the owner, then you are eligible for the property is eligible for the brownfield grants. So they don't like that to be really highly touted. This happens fairly often, but we had the EPA administrators tell us very distinctly that this is definitely a common mechanism.
Okay, so we're kosher.
And that was run by EPA. I think it was when we got about in mid-June or something.
Mm-hmm. And to make sure, Resiliency Authority is a appropriate entity. So it all passed the sniff test.
I'd like to go to the public comment. We did make a commitment.
I just got the public comment in the hallway.
Okay. So I know we've lost most of the public, but if anybody would like to provide testimony, please. You just state your name and address for the record.
17 Southgate.
You turn your mic on.
Oh, isn't it on? It's on. No?
Right green.
Push. I got it. Okay, thank you. Real quick comment, and you can't say this. I'm an old man and have no filters. I've been following this now for a couple of weeks. Your concern is my concern. This has been presented to you backwards. Everything I heard today raises and answers a bunch of questions which have been raised because you never got this information before. So I want to see those amendments. I am like you. I don't have an issue with the whole concept if it's clear as to what the role of the authority is, but that's not been clear. The amendments make it clear, at least the amendments I proposed and that Alderman Savage proposed. So I don't have issues except yours one of which is why this didn't occur 6 months ago, 8 months ago, a month ago, why it's being presented now with such a rush. When anything's presented to me with a rush, I worry about it. You all are worried about it for good reason, because it's being pushed as do it today, do it Monday, irrespective of what it says. The two things I'd like to see further is I'd like to see what MDE has said in response to the stage 2. And I've issued a PIA request to MDE as well as to the city to get that information, what they presented, what MDE sent to them. I haven't seen that. Wouldn't you like to see what MDE said about all this? I agree it seems like a thorough report, but I'd like to see what they said about these levels, which are now being told can be capped. But if you put, as he said, you put 2 floors of parking underneath, that's an enormous greater expense. I think it's a great plan. I like the plans. They sound good. But again, I've said my piece. If you all are going to delay it, it'll give me time to look at more of this and spend more time on it. But a lot of clarity came out today that my view was you weren't being told and you should have been told right away.
Thank you, Mr. Clements. Is there any additional testimony from the public?
Hi, I'm Teresa Sutherland. I am the treasurer of the Resilience Authority and a board member. And talking about the timing of amendments in the bill, the authority has to submit the application by the end of November. If it takes a month once you've submitted the deed to get it recorded, that means the deed has to be submitted by the end of October. That means the October 27th council meeting is the latest the council could pass the ordinance on third reader. If the amendments are substantive, which I believe they are since they're changing the terms and conditions of the conveyance, then the city council has to amend the bill and pass it on second reader by the end of September. So as you consider the timing of this, if those amendments are substantive, and it seems to me changing the terms and conditions under which the transfer will take place, as well as what parcels get conveyed and whether the fuel pumps are part of that, then that means you have to pass those amendments by the second meeting in September. I just want to put that out there as you consider the timing of your actions.
So, may I?
Thank you for your testimony, Alderman
So, thank you. And I agree. I think that timing, but that does say that we don't have to rush this through Monday night. We can work on the amendments and we can get this passed in the first council meeting in September, which also, well, I mean, I wish we could do the subdivision differently so that it's not dependent upon an ordinance. And that's one of the questions I wanted to ask. We've done lot subdivisions without ordinances before. Why is it dependent upon having an ordinance passed?
No, I don't think the subdivision
No
is.
one's gonna
I don't
touch
think the
that.
subdivision is.
Pardon me?
I don't think the subdivision is what's driving the ordinance. It's the transfer of the property. The subdivision is to move Weems Well and Field out so that you can continue for the Brownfield grant. It's
Right,
to
but-
separate out Weems Well and Field and create that lot 1. If you wanted to keep Weems Well and Field
This
as
is actually
part of the process, we wouldn't have to do the subdivision. We would transfer everything in its entirety. 932 and 935 could be transferred to the Resilience Authority and go under the Brownfield grant, but we would lose control of Weems Well and Field at that time.
No, I think you're missing my question. I think it is a question to Ms. Leonard. I understand the timing that it takes to get this lot subdivision done, and I do not want to hold that up. But my question is, why do we have to do the lot subdivision by using an ordinance as the vehicle? Is there something in code that says we can't divide the lot unless we have an ordinance?
Ashley Ladner, no, we don't need an ordinance for the subdivision, but you can't finalize the deed and the descriptions of the property in the deed until the subdivision occurs. So if you could go ahead with the subdivision, but there's really no point in doing the subdivision if you're not going to proceed further. And we need the okay that you're going to sell the property so that we're doing them parallel. We're going to do the subdivision, but we need the subdivision to occur so we can put the correct information in the deed, which is connected to the ordinance. So it's all running on a parallel course. We could subdivide it. We don't need a deed or resolution to do that, but the whole point of the subdivision is for purposes of the description and the deed and the ordinance.
I guess that confuses me more than helps me. I mean, it would seem to me like we could say to you, whether we're remediating or not, we would like to subdivide for whatever reason, and the Office of Law could start that work. That seems to me the real urgency for action on Monday. The rest of these things, as Ms. Sutherland just gave us, there's room, there's timing. I don't like to put it to the last minute. I would really like to have had this behind us already, but we really are going to be discussing for the next hour or two amendments that are going to have to then get transferred to all of our other colleagues by Monday evening. I think that's unrealistic and unreasonable request, but if it doesn't require the ordinance to do the lot subdivision, suppose we're just doing the lot subdivision on a whim. You have the authority to do that, right, without an ordinance?
It would not be the Office of Law, it would be Department of Planning and Zoning in
Right.
conjunction
Well,
with.
so if they say we would like to do this lot subdivision and the administration okays it, why is the ordinance stopping that from going forward?
It is not stopping that, but we still need approval to do the deed so that we make sure that what we're subdividing matches with what you're approving in the deed ordinance. So if we don't have a final approval on what you're approving in the deed ordinance, that's sort of driving how we're going to do the subdivision, because the two have to match. So we don't need the approval to do the subdivision, but we need them to match and we need them to run on parallel courses so that they don't get off kilter with one another.
I'm not convinced, but we'll discuss it in the committee. I think it's an artificial pressure to do something. Suppose Director Jakubiak had decided that it's good planning to divide it into 3 parcels. Couldn't he just come to the Office of Law? Presumably would have to go through the city manager, but say, we want 3 parcels here instead of 1. And it would just be processed. It wouldn't come to the council for an ordinance.
Correct.
Yeah. So it just feels...
I do think that you are sort of underestimating the amount of time it takes to transfer
I
a
don't
property.
think I am. I agree with you.
Respectfully, I do think you're underestimating how much time it takes. And considering there's really finite people in the city who know how to handle land transfers.
I accept that totally. Frankly, I think you could have started this lot subdivision process 3-4 months ago. Once we knew that this was the general concept for doing this?
It is in process. We are running them parallel, but we can't stop and pause one to let another one finish. We don't have enough. In my professional opinion, we do not have enough time to do the subdivision, wait for that to finish, and then do the transfer. We will not make.
And then do what?
And then do the deed and the transfer and the ordinance. If you are going to do it one at a time, we will not get it done by the end of November, especially not in an election year when your agendas are full. There's a million other things that are being asked for. We don't have time, in my professional opinion, we don't have time or resources to do the whole subdivision, wait till that's done and recorded, and then do the next step. But that's my professional opinion.
But that's not what we're asking. We're not asking you to stop one before you start the other. There's no way to run these concurrently. I mean, you're saying
We are. That's what we're trying to do now.
but you're not saying that. You're telling us. You just said you don't have time to run one process and then start the next process.
In my opinion, we need the deed to be approved as soon as possible. We're going to have to go through a purchase and sale agreement, possibly. We're going to have to go through a formal closing because EPA is going to expect to have all the formal paperwork. We're going to have to find a closing company potentially to do all that. We're going to have to finalize the deed. We're going to have to record that. All of that takes time, and a lot of it includes other governments who will not be rushing this through. So I feel like, in my opinion, waiting until September to approve it is too long. Now, if we were meeting next month, I could say maybe we could delay it into next month. But waiting a full month at this point, I just don't feel like professionally we have a full month to wait.
But we know what needs to be done. I don't understand why we couldn't be putting those pieces in place. Put in line.
We are putting the pieces in place, but
that's not what you're saying.
There is still, once you pull the trigger, there are still a lot of other things to do.
But you know what they all are.
Yes, but I can't control how fast they will go.
But you can get a company that's going to do the deed. You can line up all of those people.
Yes, but
you have a whole month before we talk.
That's
again.
Presuming that you guys are promising that in September you are going to pass it and not chase your minds. And legally, from a legal perspective, there's only so much city taxpayer money you can put towards resources, and with an approval that is not guaranteed at this point.
Well, I think the approval.
Well,
we don't have the deed. You don't have the deed for us to approve now anyway.
I have a draft of the deed. It should be uploaded with the ordinance. I mean, it needs to be modified because we keep doing amendments, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a guarantee that we're going to pass it. Again, I don't see the council say no to this at all. It's a matter of what type of amendments we want to get included in this. I mean, I'm actually, and as far as substantive amendments, just go back to that for a sec. That I don't think is going to be a delay because it's a determination of the council whether or not we
correct. It is your
something
determination.
Substantive. It would have to be a motion and approved by the council. And again, I don't see us doing that, especially on simply whereas clauses. But I do. That said, I do. Looking at the Resilience Authority amendments, a quick look. I'm generally, I think I'm good with these. I think they reflect a number of things that I was looking to propose anyway. But again, the question comes down to what's the best course for public transparency as well as ourselves. I generally, as I think we said, I don't like the feeling of being rushed, but I do understand. I'm trying to also respect staff's input, and we can either move to postpone and push it to September, the first week of September, come to the first meeting of the council in September, or we can try to rush through these amendments this evening, at least on some of them, or we can take action and just send it back to the council for Monday. So I don't know if there's any preference from the committee on that end. Those are kind of the options I see at the moment.
Actually, and I think, Ms. Leonard, you can really help us. I don't know if you've looked at the Savage amendments, because all of the whereas clauses are being, they're different versions of whereas clauses, but really the essence of the ordinance is the changes that are in the 1 through 9. Now it used to be 1 through 6. So have you had an opportunity to look at these?
I believe so, yes.
So committee, I think it's time to start talking about the guts of this, and I think the real guts of this is the changes that are actually the ordinance, not the whereases. So there's a change to item 2. There's I can't even tell. I guess a new item 3, but it's changing
Alderman,
the
what
list
page are
from.
you on the
I'm-
amendment?
I'm
on the Savage.
Savage amendments on page 4 of 5 of the Savage amendments, and
Well, if I could jump in real quick, Alderman, just did the Resilience Authority see these when you drafted, before you drafted yours? So you presumably incorporated some of the. Okay.
we're 3 hours into the meeting, and we're getting to the meat.
Well, is that what we want to do? I know
think
you have
so.
other business. The Environmental Matters does not.
The Rules
We do
Committee
have
does have
yeah,
other business.
We have other business and so forth, but I would really like to go over these if we're comfortable with these. Whereas clauses are nice, but if the committees are comfortable with these things on page 9, it's conceivable that we can make a recommendation
Well, let me
for a vote on Monday.
let me suggest starting with the resilience authorities, because those are more. They take mine into consideration, and they're probably more refined because they've had legal review. Mine have not. So while you're reviewing that, I'll look through and see if I can figure out if there's something from mine that I need to get inserted into that or want to get inserted in.
Mr. Chair, I am very uncomfortable that we are pushing Rules Committee back when we have legislation that has to get through us today.
Okay.
Okay, we're already 3 hours in, and we're about to deal with the meat of.
Yeah.
It's unfair. I'm sorry.
I understand. So do you want to, let's pause then and figure out how we want to proceed. Is there,
Well, we're between a rock and a hard place.
do we want to, so another option,
I don't want to be pressured. If we have to be pressured, staff has to be pressured.
yeah.
I'm sorry. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
And I'm not hearing that because we're making every effort that everybody is not doing the same.
So let's
A
do-
fourth option might be, and this would still not make it for Monday's meeting, but we could have a special meeting next Wednesday of
Special
perhaps-
council meeting?
special committee meeting.
Or
Well,
committee.
or but council. Oh yeah, no, we could just do a special committee meeting if we wanted to try to get something ironed out as far as amendments. We'd still, I mean, that's not, well, I don't think that's really going to help us because we're still going to be limited by the September council meeting. So never mind.
So let
It
me
won't be in
let me
time for
do
the
let me
committee.
propose 2 things. One, I will offer to be the sponsor of Amendment 3 from the Resiliency Authority, because right now it has no sponsor. But 2, and I'm going to impose on Ms. Reuter, I would like to see something that compares the changes that are being proposed by the Resiliency Authority to the guts of the ordinance, which is the now therefore. And it looks like they're keeping the things that are in the ordinance as of now all the way up to item 6. Your amendments make some amendment before item 6. And I don't have any good way other than flipping back and forth to compare what's in your amendments, which I think are my amendments as well, versus what the Resiliency Authority, and I flat out even haven't had a chance to read them, let alone compare them.
And you're reading something different.
Alderman, that gets to the Alderwoman Finlayson, Rules of Government Chair's concern about. It sounds like you're concerned we're not going to have time to go through these amendments tonight and go through the Rules of Government
Exactly.
meeting. So we really need to decide if we're going to just pass this onto the council for Monday and try to deal with amendments before then, or just postpone action until the first week of September. We'll schedule a special meeting.
I am very sympathetic to Miss Leonard's term about underestimating the amount of time it's going to get to do the thing that is the linchpin in my mind to allowing the Resiliency Authority to go ahead and do their work. And that is get this subdivision done and get the deed done. And I really would like some more clarification about why that can't go forward in spite of the ordinance. But nevertheless, I think that if we wait till September, and as Ms. Leonard pointed out, we've got the crush of a whole ton of other legislation that's trying to rush its way through before the end of the term, that we're just not going to get it done. And
But it's okay for us to be under that pressure.
well, I'm not happy about that. Believe me, I tried to be reserved in my comments about how we are being disrespected and inundated at the last minute with things that we could have gotten months ago, literally months ago. And I'm not going to get into that, but I cannot instantaneously resolve the differences between Amendment 2 and Amendment 3.
Well,
I'm going to need some time.
And I'll point out that the phase 2 assessment was done in February.
Yeah, I know.
And we didn't hear about it until
Yeah.
today. But so
Mr.
I don't
Chair,
want this to die either, though. Like, I don't want to.
I'm good with passing it all on to the full council. And we'll have this whole discussion Monday night during the council meeting and let everybody wait. And by then, everyone will have an opportunity to look at the Resilience Authority's amendments and come prepared.
Well, those
to
are
vote
now
on
my
Monday night.
amendments. I've
Well,
offered to be
you
the
know what?
sponsor.
If it can fall to us, it can fall to all of us. Okay? And I know folks have a chance to lobby the council. The other alternative is postpone it.
Yeah, well, I don't necessarily. That was my original inclination, but I don't want to unintentionally sabotage this. The potential to get the main. That's a lot of money for us to get.
Well, and it's a lot
No
of
one
other
wants that.
programs too.
No, I
We'd
No
be-
one
agree.
wants
Yeah,
agree.
where we'd be sabotaging the CNI program too. I mean, there's a huge number of things that are resting. And
So that's essentially a motion of no action, or do you want to give a favor? I'm hesitant to
no
give a favorable
action.
recommendation
yeah,
at this point, but we
I say
could do
no
no
action.
action.
here's what I would like. I would like to suspend the joint meeting. I don't know what your view is, but I think we can dispatch 0925 pretty quickly.
I'm not going to predict anything.
Well,
I'm
you're
sorry.
right. I would be willing to meet again later on this week as a joint committee. We don't end the meeting, we postpone it or whatever, you suspend it and pick it up again.
I
I
suppose
don't know
that's-
what your
yeah,
schedules allow.
That's a
But
good
I'm-
idea.
After today until Monday, I'm free. I'd
But-
like to go to birthday dinner tonight, but other than that,
Happy birthday! Aren't you so glad you're?
Spending it here.
He loves it. This is how he likes to spend his birthday.
He thrives.
He does.
I don't want to just dump it. Our colleagues haven't had the benefit of this really wonderful briefing, fulsome briefing. And I think they're depending upon us to do the deep dive, the heavy lift.
Well, okay, let's explore that idea a little bit quickly. What are your thoughts? I'm open to the idea of trying to schedule something really quickly tomorrow or Friday, but what are
Well,
Your inclinations?
we can try to schedule it, but I'm getting ready to take
Oh,
off
yeah,
for a
yeah.
hiatus because we are out
Yeah.
during August. And,
Maybe.
yeah,
Maybe
well,
not.
you know,
I'm not coming back.
we're not going to be forced to come back. But I don't want to kill it either. I just want to give us a fair opportunity to understand all the nuances. And shame on staff for not getting it to us at an earlier date. But it is what it is.
Okay, so because I would, again, even if that would give us time to at least, if we reschedule it hypothetically for Friday at some time, and this is essentially going to be a special emergency meeting.
Do we have the time to announce that meeting?
Well, that's what
Or
I'm saying.
how
We
does
don't.
it work?
We don't end this meeting.
Okay.
Whatever the term of art is.
There's no time for tomorrow, but it sounds like we could make it for Friday potentially. I mean, it'd be-
Friday morning, I could do at a funeral in the afternoon.
well, the law I think is 24 hours. We tend to do longer, but we can get away with 24.
So we were going to have a 3:00 work session tomorrow.
No, that's canceled.
I know. We
Oh,
were
you're
going
saying-
to.
yeah.
So presumably the space is available 3:00 tomorrow.
We could do that.
So we could potentially do, and again, I think there are provisions for emergency meetings, which I think we have calls. The law office may have any information on that. Okay.
Yeah.
But if we could get it scheduled for tomorrow, again, I'm good with that. That would give at least a little bit of time to go through amendments, reconcile, give us to review.
Well, and get this sent out to our colleagues because they can be looking at it without
No, you're
attending
right.
the meeting. That nobody has seen my Amendment 3,
Your amendment.
including me.
I was gonna say, your amendment 3.
Well, I volunteered to be the
Well,
sponsor.
One tomorrow. We don't need 1 to 5, but I think we could do 1 to 3, or sorry, 1 to 2. Yeah. 1 to 2 tomorrow.
I can.
I'm good.
I'm good.
I mean,
It's
that's
only
still
my
not
sister's
gonna-
birthday.
That's still not going to give us much time to work on this.
Yeah, I need time to read it.
So why
And
wouldn't we
compare
just take the work session time?
Yeah, that's what she's saying.
That's
We
3
can.
to
We could
5.
do 1 or 3,
Oh,
or in
okay.
between. We could do 3 o'clock. I would have to be out by
Well, 1 is
4:30.
good.
Well, that's fine with me too.
3 to
We'll have to
4:30.
get, the staff will have to get reconnected.
The 3 to 4:30 tomorrow.
Everybody come back to enjoy our
Or
yammering.
1. I mean, you said 1 o'clock. Can we
Yeah.
do 1 o'clock
Yeah, that's available.
in
All right.
case we need more time?
Here's Ms. Leonard. Yes.
There is an emergency provision, but you're supposed to give as much notice as you reasonably can once you set the date and time for non-urgent matters. So if you set the date and time, you can send it out tonight. I'm legally comfortable with this being an emergency at this point. So I have no concerns with you guys doing that. Especially because it's also a continuation.
Yeah, we're continuing the meeting.
I mean, I'll make that work if I need to, but I'd kind of almost prefer Friday. It'd give us at least a day, but if you
Well,
think
that gives
Thursday's best,
people
I'll
more
do
time
that.
to get notice, that's for sure. But is the
What
is
time
the
are you
space
talking about on
is the
Friday?
space
Do
available?
we have
on
time
Friday?
on Friday? What time?
1 o'clock on Friday?
1 o'clock Friday? Oh, we could do 1 o'clock Friday. That would give us a little more room to, I think, if
Yeah.
you're good with it, I'd be
Yeah.
more comfortable with that.
Yeah, and it also gives more notice to the public.
Yeah, then you could meet notice normally. You could also sort of consider this as a recess, which would sort of lead into the
Well,
emergency.
that's what
Yeah.
I wanted to do is just recess the meeting
Yeah.
and pick it up
Environmental
again.
matters, anyway.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so we don't
Okay.
end it, we recess it. And I
Okay.
know everybody else wants to come back.
Yeah. All right, let's plan on tentatively then 1 to 3
On
environmental
Friday.
matters
Friday.
this Friday.
So this meeting is recessed till
Just-
1 to 3 on Friday.
Just environmental.
Just
I
environmental.
mean, we'll see
matters.
what happens with rules.
Well, are we
Yeah, at this
recessing the
point.
joint meeting or are we
No,
recessing?
just
No, you have to do them
environmental.
separate.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that'll give us time reconcile, and then that'll give me time to get any reconciled amendments to the law office for review. I'm sure Ms. Leonard will be.
Oh, and by the way, we're all in
Ms. Schroeder will be
environmental
willing
matters,
to prioritize.
Right.
for
Who's
Friday.
the audience going to be? What 3 all?
Okay.
So we're saying 1 to
then-
3 on Friday?
Yeah. So is somebody willing to make a motion to recess?
I move we recess the joint committee.
No, recess environmental matters.
All right, I move we recess environmental matters.
And you don't need to say
And we'll
until
reconvene
when.
on Friday at 1 o'clock.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. So environmental matters is recessed. Now I turn it over to Rules of Government Chair.
You got.
Thank you, everybody. This is, I know a lot of
you.
time, but very, very, very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah,
And very
thank-
thorough.
yeah, thank you for that presentation. That,
Thank
that
you.
helped
My pleasure.
so much.
And we're getting copies, or it's already attached? Is the copy
we've got it
attached
now.
to
We've got the-
Narconicus?
Please upload all the amendment drafts, Ms. Reuter.
Okay.
Reuter. You can upload all the, Cynthia?
Environmental
Cynthia?
matters, reconvene.
All right.
Well, can you make sure that they get uploaded? 'Cause we want to make sure the public has a chance to review.
So that's okay. No, absolutely not. You get to stay here.
Where 020 is recessed. Oh, you mean
You're
in-
talking
in
about in rules.
Yeah. So-
Booted from rules? I don't think so.
So yeah,
So what are we going to do in rules? But then there won't be a position from rules. But they're not listed. Rules isn't listed as a required sponsor on it anyway. It's not.
well then I move we don't recommend.
You know, we're in session. Yes.
Assistant
Okay, so,
Attorney Leonard
We are
and
now,
Director Flinner.
excuse me, we're
We're still live. Thank you.
okay. Rules Committee. What is before us? Legislation 02025. The sale of the city-owned property at 932 Spa Road and 935 Spa Road.
So you hopefully have received by now the Arnett Amendment 2. I could get my stupid, come on, why does this keep coming?
The Arnett Amendment 1, or I see a Finlayson Amendment 1.
We're on 0925.
Right, right. I am looking for the Arnett Amendment 2. So, and
So
I'm
we
not
don't-
seeing that.
Yeah, we don't
Oh,
have
no,
it.
it's Savage.
No, we're talking about for 09. Savage Amendment is what?
No, we're on 020.
Oh, we're still on 020. Oh, there's no O. Oh,
No,
yeah, Arnett
remember
Amendment.
we amended
Okay.
the agenda to add 09, but we're not there yet.
Right, okay.
Okay, so the question is, there's the Savage Amendment. And again, we are not required to give an opinion because this wasn't
Yeah.
referred to our committee. So what is your flavor?
So we don't want to postpone because that would mean it wouldn't happen until September. So I think the
Well, not
Best course of
necessarily because it's not been referred to, really.
it hasn't been referred to rules.
No. Because it was asked. Then. But that's not one of the committees that's listed as it was referred.
So I move that Rules Committee take no action on 02025.
Okay, and I'll second. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Okay. All right, now the next item is 09. Okay, can you send it, please?
Yeah, so how do we get it up on our iPad?
She's sending it. Okay. Okay. Is that the only other legislation? I thought there was something else.
I thought there was too, but I couldn't remember it. So
Right.
this is enough. The day has been long enough already.
I agree.
All right. So Alderman Savage and I are co-sponsors of this legislation. The purpose of the
I'm sorry, we have. Have we taken action on Amendment 1?
No, we have not.
Okay.
But I'm going to ask to reject it. So,
But you're not on.
no. So, I'll wait till you get 3, but I can give some background, Madam Chair, if you wish.
Please.
So, the purpose of this legislation is to recognize existing maritime activities outside of maritime zones, and most specifically in the R4 zone. This affects a number of properties. There's the Nautilus Point, former Watergate. I believe that Severn House is R4. In Ward 7, there's a big apartment building on the upper reaches of Back Creek, and so forth. But the thing that precipitated this was that there were some activities for paddle boards that were going on at Nautilus Point, and then we found that there was a virtual yacht club, the Freedom Club, at Nautilus Point. And I think they're both desirable activities, but they're not permitted uses in the R4 zone. So I am sponsoring and co-sponsored with Alderman Savage this legislation that reflects the fact that these kinds of activities are going on in the R4 zone. This has been to the Planning Commission, who came back with favorable recommendations with some potential conditions, which I will talk about, but I'm rejecting. But also went to the Maritime Advisory Board, and I was really concerned because these kinds of maritime activities happening out of maritime zones could have been potentially competition for maritime activities within the maritime zone, particularly activities of marinas in the maritime zones, activities of boat rentals in the maritime zones, all of which are permitted in the maritime zone. But there were actually 3 times that the MAB took this up, and at every meeting, the maritime businesses that are a member of that board indicated that they were comfortable with this legislation. There was no opposition. So the legislation as presented has one addition to the use table, which is to add boat rentals, charters, and charter service. And as initially submitted, those would be approved by special exception. Director Jakubiak and I, and the attorney representing Nautilus Point, who are the people precipitating this, came up with some more. Oh gosh, where's my piece of paper? Some more things to add to the use table that were more fulsome, and that's what you probably you should have just received from Kayla.
Did you send it? Yeah.
So let me, if I might, Madam Chair, dispatch with the Savage Amendment. He proposes to take out of the ordinance as submitted boat rentals, charters, and charter services, and substitute non-motorized vessels under 17 feet in length. Now, I think we do want to get in approval of non-motorized vessels under 17 feet of length or over 17 feet of length. But the bigger purpose of this legislation is to legitimatize the maritime activities that are happening in the R4 zone. So my amendment, I believe, supersedes Amendment 1. So I would move an unfavorable recommendation for the Savage Amendment, which is Amendment 1, which is this.
Right, and that amendment would simply make it legitimate for all of those.
For paddle boats only. Doesn't make it legitimate for any other maritime activity.
Okay, so
Paddleboards
it's
and kayaks
striking.
and canoes.
This
Yeah.
is what I don't understand. It's striking boat rentals, charters, and charter services.
Yeah.
In red and underlined.
Right.
But then in blue, it adds non-motorized vehicles under 17 feet.
Yeah, which would be paddleboards, kayaks, canoes.
Anything but a houseboat, in other words. I know what this is all about. It's not even.
No,
it's,
I'm not even going there.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, that's what the planning commission recommended, prohibiting short-term rentals and houseboats. And I said, that has nothing to do with this. That is a whole different area and will be handled elsewhere in the code and will be handled generically across the city, not in this piece of legislation. Let's keep the focus on what is.
My question is why it's added to where it's struck out and not added to where it's added. So you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, so this is what was proposed, that these things would be approved by.
Okay.
And Rob is asking this be struck out. But no, I don't think he paid attention to that. Well, I guess this would still apply, but it would only apply for paddleboats and kayak.
So why wouldn't it speak to it down here where it says non-motorized vehicle? I don't understand why that's red, this is blue.
This is the red is the original ordinance.
No, the original ordinance.
This is the original ordinance.
The original change is in red.
Yeah, the original change was
Okay.
said boat rentals, charters, and charter services as a special exception.
Right. Okay. So
He's
in
saying
R4.
strike that and put in the blue.
But what I'm saying is it doesn't say what you're putting.
Yeah, this is the blue is what
Yeah, but
he's
what?
proposing to
But
put.
that means nothing.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm assuming that this would then refer, this special exception isn't strict. So these blue would be approved by special exception.
You understand the confusion?
Yeah,
Or
I
is it just
do,
me?
but I want to reject it anyway. So don't get confused.
Okay.
Now, what? So this is the original, and what I have worked with Director Jakubiak, Attorney Dales representing Nautilus Point, and also in discussions between Attorney Dales and the Director Lomax of the Maritime Advisory Board. So my motion says we'll add to the use table essentially three things. One, we keep in boat rentals, and under that is boats and paddlecraft rentals, charters, and charter services. And those will be permitted. They're not by special exception. They're permitted now in the R4 zone. We will also add boat services, which are tugboats, towing vessel services, fireboats, because we keep our fireboats there,
Oh, really?
pilot boats, harbor master boats, and similar types of vessels, and that's permitted by right. Then we add boat storage, which are docks, slips, piers, and other facilities in which boats are berthed, and that is permitted. No special exception. And that's what's going on now. Boat storage on land. Open areas, paved or unpaved structures providing on-land boat and marine equipment storage and display, and that is permitted, not by business, permitted by right. And then, I'm sorry, that will be permitted by subject to standard. I'll get to what that means. So right now it says P, that needs to be permitted subject to standard. And then the final one,
Well, wait a minute. Where does it say? It doesn't say subject. to
I know
standard.
I want to change that to subject to standards. So that's
So that's for storage on land?
yeah. And what this does is allow the boat, the paddle boards, kayaks, and canoes to be rented in R4 districts, and they will be kept on land until somebody rents it and launches it. So it allows the storage of those facilities on land. And any other equipment that's associated with paddles, life vests, so on and so forth. So that's permitted subject to standards, and the standard is right below here in the blue, 2164-125. Boats and marine vessels, on land boat and marine equipment is storage and display in the R4 district. Only open areas, paved or unpaved, and structures providing on land boat, marine equipment, and storage are permitted. Any open areas, paved or unpaved structures providing on land boat, marine storage may also be replaced in kind. So when in the use tables, things are permitted by right unless you say they're permitted subject to standards, and then the standards are displayed in 2164. And that's where this amendment would go. Or it could be permitted subject to special exception, and that means you have to go to the Board of Appeals and get a special exception. All that criteria is laid out in 2121. All right, so what my amendment is doing that the original ordinance did not do is recognizing all of the maritime activities that normally happen in maritime zones, but are also happening in the R4 district. And they're making them legal, legitimate, and therefore not subject to citation. So that would mean that the Freedom Charter Group, the virtual yacht club, would now be, in which the mayor belongs to, would now be legal and not subject to citation. Having paddle boards or kayaks or whatever stored on the land and rented out and allowing people to have water access would be permitted and not subject to citation. So the overall thrust of the legislation is to recognize and legitimatize a pre-existing condition, a condition that has gone on for decades and only came under scrutiny when there were some complaints about Capital Sup storing paddleboards there. From my perspective, paddleboards are desirable access to the water. They're reasonably cheap. And Back Creek is an ideal place to have it rather than Spa Creek because you're not in the middle of a whole bunch of heavy-duty traffic. There is traffic in the lower end of Back Creek. But so I would offer for the committee's consideration the Arnett Amendment 2, which needs itself an additional amendment, which is the boat storage on land is permitted subject to standards. And the standard is in 2164-125.
Alderman, is R4 the only district where this is accessible or permissible?
No. In fact, in R2, R2NC, private properties also have slips. And that is not being addressed by this. I am sure that there are up along Back Creek. Director Jakubiak, do you know what Shearwater and President's Point's zoning is? Are they R3 or are they also R4? They're condominiums. I just don't remember off the top of my head. Yeah. Yeah, we may have to come back and address maritime activities that are outside of the maritime zone in residential zones. That's topic for another piece of legislation. This one,
Well, but I have to ask, why did you narrow it to R4?
because be blunt, that's what I was asked to do. And it is the point of contention. It was a problem for the permitting staff in planning and zoning because they should have been citing these kinds of activities. And it was, and actually the initial legislation was R4's properties on properties greater than 10 acres. To me, that smacked of spot zoning. And so I said, I'm not going to do that. There are some very big R4 zones on either side of the Row Boulevard Bridge. They just happen to be cemeteries. So I guess they are residential, but they're not. They
I'm
don't
not
have
sure about that, but
they don't have marinas. So I think you're raising a valid point, and it is not something that I got to with this legislation. I was addressing a top point situation for our permit staff.
so what are the motions? Motions 1 through 3, motion 4, and motion 5.
I don't know what you're looking at.
Um,
Oh, you're looking at the Arnett Amendment?
and the legislation and the amendment.
We,
Is that
Ms.
something-
Reuter, can
Ms.
you
Reuter, is
speak to that?
supposed to be there?
I think those, I mean, these are the
On
amendments.
page 4, motions 1 through 3. And then on page 5, motion 4, motion 5.
Cynthia Reuter, policy analyst for the Office of Law. The section where it says motion, that the motion corresponds with the number that's in the actual amendment. The part that you see that says motion, that is the unofficial portion of the amendment that just is the visual view of what, if the motion is put into the ordinance, that's what it's going to look like in the ordinance. Your focus is on the first part where it has 1, 2, 3, and 4 with a bracket.
I'm not clear. It says motions 1 through 3, and then it's the table of uses that follow. And then it says motion 4, and then it is the written text.
All right, that's part 4 of the motion. basically. This-
Of which motion?
It's a motion and amendment.
the amendment is an
synonymous
emotion.
So is that an amendment? Why, I don't know why we don't use motions,
I know.
1, 2, 3. I don't understand.
Well, you consider it part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4.
Motions 1 through 3 are parts 1, 2, and 3 of.
Right.
Of Amendment 2. It's all part of Amendment 2.
Alderman Arnett's amendment has 4 parts. I can't remember, 5 parts to it?
5 parts to it. So the fifth part is an amendment to Title 2172, which is definition of terms, and it adds a definition of paddle, which is part of what Alderman Savage was referring to in his amendment. Paddlecraft refers to any type of water vessel that is patrolled and steered by a human power, where the primary means of propulsion is a single or double-bladed paddle without reliance on which motors or other craft. Or shouldn't be in there.
Right, that needs to be corrected. But we keep adding these new features in. We don't have motions in our legislation,
I know.
as far as I know. So can we please take those out?
Yeah.
It's confusing to me, and I deal with this. I can't imagine what the community's thinking. But motions what? But you made a motion, Alderman, to
Yes.
support, to give a favorable recommendation to the Arnett Amendment 2, and I will second.
Right.
Fine.
Thank you.
But there is the editorial change.
Yes, we have to do boat land storage. It needs to be permitted subject to standards. And in the definition section, we need to strike or, because paddlecraft do rely on oars and canoes rely on oars. So it should be read without reliance on motors or other mechanical devices.
Say that again. I'm not seeing single double-bladed paddle without reliance on oars, motors.
Paddle is an oar. And so the oar should be struck there without reliance on motors or other mechanical devices.
I see. I'm looking at the word or like OR. You're talking OA.
You English teachers.
I know. Okay. I'm good.
Yeah. All right.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Anybody ready to go home?
It's only been 7 hours. 3 hours, 45 minutes.
All right.
Okay.
So
is that it? And Miss,
that is it. But for
can we just wait one moment till Miss Jackson comes in to make sure this is it?
well, there is one other thing. Ms. Reuter, I'm assuming because we have now, the Rules Committee has passed this ordinance, it can go on the agenda for Monday night, which means that we don't need to do the continuing resolution. So that can come off the agenda. And Mr. Dales doesn't have to come back tonight.
He's
after
watching
his
now.
dinner.
He's watching now.
All right.
Going back to 09, though, I'm assuming that Alderman Savage is withdrawing his amendment because we took no action.
Yeah. Yes.
So
Now,
we
let me
took
tell
no
you
action on it, and we supported the
what
Alderman.
the Planning Commission wanted to add were conditions saying in R4 there could be no short-term rentals and there could be no houseboat. Short-term rentals doesn't have anything to do with R4 on the land. I mean, it's an apartment building. And I don't know what the apartment building rules are. And houseboats are a matter for the maritime zones, not for the R4. But I just felt that it was taking something that's very micro and confusing the purpose of the legislation. So I did not choose to put into my amendments those recommendations from the planning. I was glad that they voted favorably on the ordinance, but they wanted to put in those two amendments. And yeah, it's my brother Michael wishing me a happy birthday.
Oh, well, that's good.
So
Okay, so we're going to assume that he's going to withdraw first. And this will be on the agenda. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order?
this is the best birthday I've ever had.
I hope you are going out to dinner.
Going home to visit some Irish whiskey.
Move to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye.